Unfound has now covered 384 disappearances over the course of about 550 episodes. It has an interview-based format and concentrates on the facts, not the theories. Today, and for the 22nd time, I will take you back to the beginning, then right up to the present, as I cover news over the past 4 months pertaining to some of Unfound's cases. I'm Ed Denzel, and this is Unfound. This is usually where I put the Unfound news section in these update episodes, but since this is the last episode of 2025, I'm choosing to kind of look back at this year and give you my assessment of what has gone on, both the good and the bad. And then before we get into the updates, I'm also going to go through where I see Unfound going for 2026. So let's get started right now by looking back at 2025, and I'm going to start with the bad stuff first. And I'll start here. Of course, many of you surely remember, at least about exactly a year ago, some sleep problems had crept up into my life. Still looking back at that now, I'm still not sure why. But that carried over well into this year of 2025. And because of that, although I didn't necessarily take the beginning of the year off, I did have a couple months where I was replaying old episodes, revisitation episodes, as you know, that I call them. Was still doing other things like the live show, and I was still conducting the think tank on Sunday evenings, but did not have a new disappearance for until maybe March of this year, maybe into April. And so for 2025, did not feature as many new disappearances as in prior years. Of course, I would consider that to be bad. Now, the good part of it is that I eventually did overcome those sleep issues. And in fact, I'm sleeping spectacularly now. In fact, I think for the total year of 2025, I do not think that I have taken one afternoon nap at all for the entire year. That is how good my sleep at night has been. And I credit it all to no drugs, of course, no drugs in my life, no Ambiens or anything. I credit it to cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia, getting on that program at the beginning of this year, and then also having some counseling with a sleep therapist for the first 3 to 4 months of this year, once a week. I think we eventually spaced it out to maybe every couple weeks, and then maybe the last one, there was like a month in between sessions. And you should know I still email her once in a while. We did this over Zoom. I still email her once in a while and thank her for this. Changed my life. And so I will continue to say, if you have any sleep problems out there, get away from the drugs. Start looking up cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia. It will change your life. It's tough. You really, really, really got to follow it, and you really, really got to find a sleep therapist online. You don't have to get one locally, but online that you need somebody to guide you through it. But it works 100%, and that's why I continue to credit it with me sleeping so well these days. Like I said, no naps in 2025. 0. At 55 years old. And as you know, I'm pretty outgoing, going to the gym, disc golf, all the other things that I'm involved in my life. Singing, no naps. It's been spectacular. So it started out as a very tough year and certainly has gotten better since then. And certainly I'm in a better position now than I was a year ago. But, at the beginning of this year, not sure where everything was going to go. I really did not know if my sleep was ever going to come back, truthfully. At the beginning of the year, be very honest about this. And so I was a little unclear about what was going to happen with the podcast. But here we are, getting ready for what I think is going to be a very exciting 2026. But I have to put that in the bad column because it was 3 months of bad stuff to start this year. Another bad thing continues to be, and not just for me, but I probably for virtually any podcaster out there, is what I call the Apple problem that started in 2024, and it's not going to change. It was all through all of 2025, and I guess it's just going to be that way. Apple started counting downloads in a different way, and it has cost a lot of podcasters, like I said, I'm going to guess all podcasters, a lot of downloads, a lot of money. And I'm just not sure if it's real or not, or was this just Apple being Apple? When I say Apple Podcasts, iTunes, they just woke up one day and decided, no, we're just gonna count all of this a totally different way, different than everybody else does it. And podcasting has suffered. And it is the reason, and I'll bring it up. I never talk about it, but I think I can talk about it once a year to finish out 2025. That this podcast continues to be, I'm not going to say it's a money loser, but barely breaks even. I know that this is why when I once in a while get a comment on YouTube or I get an email or whatever else saying, you're just in it for the money and you're taking advantage of these people and everything else. And I always say to these people, anytime you want to exchange paychecks, we can do that. Anytime you want to do that, we can do that. If you think I'm making a ton of money, and I really don't know what anybody else makes. I know that I hear about True Crime Junkie, multi-million dollars. I don't know what to make of any of it. It seems to me to be a lot of hype. But this is one of the reasons is that Apple has made it very, very difficult. Very difficult. A lot tougher than it was just 2 years ago. They changed their standards, protocols, and things, and everybody suffered. And this is why I continue to say, if you want to support Unfound, patreon.com, paypal.me, become a member at the YouTube channel, things like that. That's why I keep bringing this stuff up. I'm not complaining. It's my choice to do the podcast. And really, and I'll get into this in the good stuff part of this, we're here, at least I'm here for different reasons. But what I'm telling you over the last 5 minutes is all true. The Apple problem has created monetary issues for a lot of podcasters. Fortunately, I'm a lot older than most true crime podcasters out there, and I had a lot of other work experience. All the different jobs I have, was able to save money and invest and everything. I'm not poor, but I'm not rich either. So this is what makes it a little easier for me to withstand those things, in contrast to a lot of other podcasters out there. But if you're wondering why some podcasts that you listen to went away over the last 2 years, it's probably because of the Apple issue. And you can just Google it to hear or read more about it. And then the bad thing for, of course, 2025 is not enough of these disappearances that have been featured on Unfound have been solved. I mean, I have to be realistic about it. And I would not say, hey, at least some disappearances. Shanna Boydo. And, of course, in this update episode, I'm going to talk about Jesse Farber and the rest of these guys, unfortunately, who were deceased, who were eventually found. But just not enough. Of course, I'm not necessarily responsible for that, but you know what I mean. It's bad because we always want more of them to be solved, whatever that resolution is. Of course, we're always hoping for people to be alive, but we know that that doesn't happen very often. So that's what I would say regarding bad stuff for 2025. Not a ton of bad stuff, but it's stuff that was bad or maybe continues to be bad. So allow me to now talk about all of the good things that happened with the podcast in 2025. First, I have to bring up the database or the reference guide. If you've seen the title of it, you can find the link to it in the discussion group right now, and it's one of those things I have to work on getting it set up on the new website. But that is something that took a long time to put together, where you can go in and search for any of Unfound's disappearances and toggle the different categories, and it'll filter out the ones that don't fit or the ones that do fit. And the work that a listener, Kathy, put in compiling 2/3 of the information, and then me doing the other 1/3. And then a very good friend of mine here in Florida, who's really good at this type of stuff, putting it all together in a way that it can be used. His name is Cameron. This is an idea that I had years ago. Finally, it exists, and just because I've been busy with other things here in the Christmas season, I haven't gotten to really mess around with it a lot, but that is coming, and I'm really, really looking forward to seeing some of the weird and wild stats that are going to come out of it. Of course, I've already done some of that, and if you saw my appearance on Dr. Teleska's show back in November, you can see, talked about some of those stats, but there is so much to do with this. It works so well, and it's just as I envisioned it, and it's going to continue to expand because as we cover new disappearances, those are all going to get added into it as well. So certainly, finally putting that all together, of course, with a lot of help from Kathy and Cameron, has been spectacular, and I hope you will check it out. You can find the link if you're on Facebook in the discussion group. I do hope to have a page up for it eventually on the website. And on that note, I should state for 2025, finally having a new website. It's the same address, theunfoundpodcast.com, but it looks a lot better, looks a lot more professional. And I'm going to be able to add things onto it a lot easier than I could with the old one. The old one was a mess. It just got to be a mess, and finally I said I got to do something about this. And fortunately, a former neighbor of my brother Brian could make that happen, and his name is Sheldon, and he had some other guy that he works with to do this. And so we were able to, put that all together. Well, they worked on it, and I was just giving thumbs up, thumbs down on it. And so happy that got done in 2025. And like I said, the database will eventually be on the website. So if you haven't been to the website recently, go check it out, theunfoundpodcast.com. Some other things, of course, very recently, I'm not going in any particular order here, at least chronologically, me being featured on the A&E website. That just happened within the last 10 days. AETV.com. If you go there, do a search for my name, Denzel, the article will come up. It was on the landing page for a few days, but of course they're putting new stuff on there all the time. But once it's on there, it'll always be on there. I did this interview with them back in August, and it finally came out really good. What I always worry about anytime when I do interviews with anybody is when it comes out, whether it's even somewhere I've appeared on TV, am I going, the words that they're going to put in my mouth, do they represent what I really think about disappearances or a particular case or whatever? And so far, it's been all good with the appearances that I've made. And this would include this one at aetv.com. So please go check that out. On top of that, back in August, coincidentally, I was on the A&E channel, and it was from an interview that I even forgot I did from 2 years ago. So that was nice, showing up there. And, of course, regarding Janelle Matthews, Steve Pankey. And it was one of those situations where I did it. It only took me like 3 hours. They came down to this area to Clearwater, and I went over to like an Airbnb, and they filmed it. And I totally forgot about it. And then in August, one of you listeners messaged me and said, "Hey, Ed, I saw you in A&E." And I was like, "What's that?" I totally forgot I even did it. So it came out pretty good. It came out okay. Maybe you've seen it. And I think it might even now be on YouTube. So that was good. Also, what has been really good for 2025 is the work that has been going on behind the scenes. Really two projects. One that I thought would actually see the light of day and you'd see the result of it here in 2025. That did not happen. I'm hopeful it will happen in sometime in 2026, where I gave assistant Eric a job, and he did a spectacular, took the baton from me and ran really, really fast and really, really far with it. And that is the pertaining to the disappearances of Teresa Hickman and Angela Westbury. And I'm fairly sure that in 2026, Unfound will be doing a series on their disappearances, and probably what has been the most revealing point that has come out so far is there are other people connected to them who are also missing, but it's not documented anywhere, like on NamUs or on the Charlie Project. And so Eric has been working with the Coast Guard, the FOIAs to the Coast Guard, actually working with the Department of Homeland Security or whatever they're calling it that day, and getting paperwork, getting FOIAs filled out, getting paperwork sent to them. He's made some really good connections, all in his spare time. Eric has a real job. He's a volunteer, one of my assistants, doing a fantastic job. So that we're going to blow the top right off of those disappearances, and you'll get to hear a lot that has not been made public about those women's disappearances and everything surrounding it. It's just really been mind-blowing. So sometime in 2026, I hope to have somebody from the Coast Guard on, interview somebody in at least Angela's family. I don't know if I'm going to be able to talk to anybody in Teresa's family, but it's going to be a series like has been done going way back to like with Tara Grinstead, with Up and Vanished, with Payne Lindsay. Going to do something like that, something a little out of my comfort zone, but it's probably due. The other project that I've been working on just myself in the background, but have recently introduced Eric into it, is the 1981 disappearance of Cynthia Anderson from Toledo, Ohio. Been doing a lot of work there, coordinating with her sister and her brother, and we have a lot to do in 2026. But what's that going to be? Not sure right now. Is that going to be a series 2? Not sure. Is it just going to be what we call a regular episode? Not sure. But I think a lot of good work, not to pat myself on the back too much, but a lot of good work has been done there, and I cannot thank Cynthia's brother and sister who, I just came out of nowhere. Hi, I'm Ed Densel. I'm here to help. And they've been so open to all of it and gotten to know both of them very well. And hopefully, we'll get to make all of this public, and you can look up Cynthia's disappearance on the Charlie Project to at least get the general facts, and it was on Unsolved Mysteries back in the 1980s. Her disappearance is a bit of a stumper. And then the other good thing that is going on, but it's really going to take off, I think, in 2026, is my new venture where I am going to be doing consulting work on disappearances. And yes, this is going to be something where I will expect to be paid. So, and if you want to check that out, the website is missingpersonsconsulting.com, and you can go there and read what the plan is. And that's really all I want to say about it, but that is going to happen in 2026 for sure. And that was also, that website got built at the same time that the podcast website got retooled and revamped and everything else. And this is something that I've been wanting to do for a while because I think I can. I think that the way that I've been able to accumulate information with the database, and I've proven that I can accurately predict with like 90-some% accuracy the resolution to these disappearances, and it's all documented and everything. I think that is valuable information, and I would like to teach other people how to do that, especially families, working with them, and anybody else who wants to be able to do that as well. So once again, you want to check it out, just what the website is, and there's going to be contracts between people and everything. missingpersonsconsulting.com. So that I'm finally happy was able to get the structure of that set up in 2025, although I've not done anything with it yet. So what does 2026 hold for Unfound? Of course, as I've already stated, you're probably going to get a couple series from me along with my assistant's help. But I would be looking for some changes. I'm not saying that I'm bored doing the podcast. Certainly not. Very much the opposite. But sometimes I feel like the podcast now gets in the way of more, what we might call more constructive work. And I even just, in referencing the disappearances just within the last few minutes, Cynthia Anderson, Teresa Hickman, Angela Westbury, that it is amazing. You just start working on it and things that can come up with, of course, there's been a lot of work done, but not a ton of work. And it's one of those things where, you know my attitude. There's not a lot of people out there in what we might call the real world, the material world, outside of the internet. There's really not anybody out there doing, I mean, certainly we have the scuba teams and stuff like that, but that's just a small percentage of disappearances. You know my attitude toward private investigators, very poor. You know my attitude toward police when it comes to trying to solve disappearances, very poor. You know, maybe the real world needs somebody who actually knows what has learned how to do this. And it's kind of funny to me in that there's so many people in all walks of life, whether they're pilots or engineers, and they're like, man, I would really like to have my own YouTube channel. In fact, I even see, there's airline pilots that are taking time off from their jobs so they can concentrate on their YouTube channel. Me, they're trying to get into become internet hosts and podcast hosts and YouTube hosts. They're, what I would say, getting out of the real world. They don't want to be pilots anymore. They just want to talk about piloting. Me, I feel like I'm going the opposite direction. I want to go the opposite direction. That I don't want to just talk about these disappearances anymore and interview these people and everything. I think I have the experience and the knowledge and everything else, and certainly the energy to actually solve these disappearances on my own. Or if Eric wants to help, or any of my other assistants, Cherie, Emily, Carrie, whoever, I really believe we have the ability to solve these. And, so we have these scuba teams solving these ones that are in the water. Well, we'll go and try to solve these ones on land. So I would be looking for that in 2026. What's that going to do this podcast? I don't know. But I'm just telling you that I want to take my knowledge to the real world, because that's where the action is. That's where the real progress and really, really, really changing things is going to happen. And I have been doing this for 9.5 years, so there's that too. But I'll keep reaching out to people and asking people to come on Unfound and be interviewed. I'm going to keep doing that. But like I said, in 2026, don't be surprised if things change at least a little bit. Also, what else is going on in 2026? It does sound to me like Steve Pankey's appeal is going to come through in 2026. I don't know what's going to happen there, but I've been really restricted on all of this information that I've gotten because I can't talk about it publicly from the discovery regarding both of his trials because it's been an appeal. We'll see what goes on there. He seems to think he's going to get a third trial from the letters that he's written me. We'll see. So that's something that is going to might be a big deal in 2026. And then also I'm going to be appearing at an event with some other YouTube hosts, podcasters, at an event in May. Yeah, but it's not CrimeCon or anything like that, and that's really all I can say right now. So 2026, if you're, it sounds like some things are going to be happening that maybe you've not experienced any time before in the 9 years you've been following this podcast. There's going to be new things that, once again, none of you have experienced before. Me talking about things, me doing things. If you're getting that feeling about 2026, you're right. All right, let's now get to the updates for this episode, and there are many. As I have done since the very first update episode, when was that? I don't know, the summer of 2018 or something like that. It's like, can't believe this is number 22. But I go through all of Unfound's episodes featured on the Friday podcast and then all of the Unfound Nows, and I go out there and try to find any information. Sometimes it's very easy to find, and then sometimes it's a lot more difficult, and then, of course, many of these don't have any updates at all, very sadly. So I go through, figure out which ones have updates, and I go through them the way that they were featured on Unfound. So starting back in 2016, if there are any from 2016, and then working up to the present. I have just a few notes for each of the entries, and I read the intro to each of those episodes, so maybe a little light bulb will go off, and oh, it's that disappearance. And then I just come right up to the present for all of the podcast episodes, and then I go back and then I do the Unfound Now episodes. So if you're any you knows, likes, pauses, things like that, it's because I just have notes in front of me. I do not have any written out sentences with nouns and verbs. That's how this has always been done. I'm guessing that is the way I will always do it. So let's get started. The first one being Regina Marie Boss. And I don't know if she's ever been included on one of these update episodes, but Regina Marie Boss was a mother of 3 from Lincoln, Nebraska on the evening of October 16th, 2000. She attended an open mic night at Dugan's Pub. At 1 a.m., she left the venue to go home. She was never seen again. You might remember that her car was out in the parking lot, and the trunk was open. The guitar that she had was in the vehicle, but she was never seen again. The only update is her disappearance. Been having some back and forths with friend of the podcast, John Lorden. Had not spoken to him in a while. And I hope he won't mind me saying, but he and I might be collaborating on something. We're not sure yet. For 2026. Remember, a few years ago, we collaborated on Jason Landry's disappearance. So, might do something together for 2026 in the very early stages. We haven't even picked out. Of course, I'd like to stick to a disappearance. We haven't even picked anything out yet. But we've had some back and forths about it. But he had been, I guess recently, he spoke to Regina's sister. And so we just had a, back and forth a little bit about Regina's disappearance. I don't think John would mind me saying, he's very a little, I guess I would say a little up in the air on what he thinks happened to Regina. And I can certainly understand that. And I will even admit myself that could go a couple different ways. I think statistically what we would say is that somebody who was at the bar followed her out to her car and that something happened. But I don't think any facts rule out the idea that could she have left? Of course, she had a boyfriend at the time. It seems that he had a pretty good alibi that he was home that night. And how did he get over there? And how would that all have happened? So maybe it's a little hard to understand, but I'm not sure there are any facts to rule that out. So we just talked about Regina for a little while, and I will tell you, I cannot remember the last time I talked to anybody about her disappearance. Not that I've forgotten it. Unfortunately, that's just how some of these things go sometimes. So just the update would be that John Lord and I discussed it a little bit, and it was kind of nice to maybe put it back at the forefront of my mind. And don't know where it's going to go. I think this is a disappearance. I would judge it to be right in the middle of whether it's solvable or unsolvable, 50-50. It's certainly not one of the easier ones to solve, but I would not call it one of the more difficult ones to solve either, the way I look at it. It's somewhere in the middle. So maybe that'll happen in 2026. Next update, the Marco Island 3. David Medott, Kent Monroe, Omar Shear, and Jeff Wandich were young Canadian men who were on vacation in Florida. On the morning of November 4th, 1994, they set out from Marco Island into the Gulf of Mexico in Jeff's boat, the Sea Esta, for a day of fishing and scuba diving. 48 hours later, Wandich was found stranded on a military light tower or a buoy. The boat had sunk, and the other three men were never seen again. Now, all of you know, just recently I did a revisitation of this episode while I was up there seeing my dad in Pennsylvania. And really what sparked it was the story about these four men who, while I was in Pennsylvania, got stranded about 20 miles offshore from where I am sitting recording this episode right now, right out there in the Gulf. 20 miles to my west of where I sit right now is where that happened. Fortunately, all of them survived, including a 90-year-old. My dad's 89. I cannot imagine him being stuck out in the middle of the Gulf and surviving. But it happened. Their boat overturned. It didn't sink. They were kind of stranded there. I really don't know exactly what happened. But that kind of put it in my head, well, maybe it's about time we do a revisitation episode. Then the episode comes out, and what happens, maybe you've seen the more recent news of an uncle in his 50s and a nephew in his 30s went out on a boat into the Gulf, didn't come back. The boat was found under power, I guess, going like 5 knots an hour, which is like essentially 5 miles an hour. And these days later, I forget how many days ago that happened, and I'm recording this on December 23rd of 2025. They're still missing out there. So I don't know. I don't know the timing. It was planned because of the 4 guys who capsized. It was certainly not planned. I could never predict that those 2 guys would go missing out there. So I guess it's a little bit of a mixed bag. On one hand, you hear about 4 guys, including a 90-year-old who get stranded out in the ocean, and they're in the water. They all get saved, and you're thinking, well, why couldn't Kent, Omar, and David be saved? But on the other hand, you have these 2 other guys who go missing. Their boat's still afloat. They're missing, but their boat's afloat. So, just don't know. I still have high doubts that the story that Jeff Wondich told back then is true. So that's the update. Next update, Brandon Williams. Brandon Williams, Haas to his family, was a 33-year-old from Ephraim, Utah. He had lived in such wide-ranging places as the Hamptons and California. On May 17th, 2013, he got on a bus in Salt Lake City, heading back to where he lived in Key West, Florida. On May 18th, he made a call to a friend saying he was in Nashville. He was never seen again. The update here, really nothing having, unfortunately, to do with the disappearance, but many of you know his sister Stormy was the guest way back then, and since then she has been fighting brain cancer like nobody's business, and that fight is continuing here in late 2025. She has had multiple operations done. She's fine for a while, and then it comes back. She gets an operation. She's fine for a while. It comes back. I think this started maybe 2 years after she appeared on Unfound, something like that. And so maybe this certainly started before COVID happened in 2020. So she's probably been fighting this for like 6 years. So I just wanted all of you to know about that. Maybe some of you are even friends with her on Facebook and have been following it. But all of you, of course, who believe in thoughts and prayers and everything, please keep sending those to Stormy. She is a woman who is very grounded in her faith, and I'm sure she would appreciate any of your own faith that could be sent to her. It gets fixed, and then it comes back again. It gets fixed, it comes back again. And she has shown so much courage through all of this. So if you want to send her a message, if you're friends with her on Facebook, please do that. Next update, Chip Campbell. Chip Michael Campbell was a 36-year-old from Milton, Florida. He had a big family and an even bigger heart. On March 8th, 2016, he was recorded on a video camera walking into a restroom at a Circle K. He had 2 backpacks over his shoulder. He exited the restroom without them. Although the bags were found, he was never seen again. The update here is that for the first time in like 2 years, I had lunch with his sister, Lisa. I think at least some of you know that she and I have gotten to know each other very well. Her husband, too. I like her husband so much. Cool guy. Of course, I like Lisa, too. Nothing against you, Lisa, if you're listening. But it'd been a while. Probably, I know we did not get together at all this year. And I'm even doubtful if we got together in 2024. So it's been a while, but she and I finally got to have lunch together last week. Enjoyed it immensely. We sat there for like 2 hours. Went to this seafood place, like halfway in between us, that neither of us had gone to before. Her husband was supposed to be there. Unfortunately, he was sick, so it was just the two of us. Had a great time. Of course, talked about Chip and his case, but talk was about all sorts of crazy stuff. But Chip continues to be on my mind. His disappearance still unsolved. There's been things done since Lisa appeared on Unfound. I'm thinking it was 2017, somewhere in there. It's certainly things have been done. You hear a lot of rumors and everything, but still, we're going to be coming up on the 10-year anniversary in March. Still very, very unclear as to what happened. I think I'm inclined to think that Lisa and her family think there was foul play. Very well could be. But as you know, as I now know with all these years of experience now, maybe I didn't know it back then with Chip, but now start talking about people with addiction issues, maybe some mental health issues, and you're around a lot of shady people. There are a lot of different possibilities. But it was great getting together with Lisa, and I really think we could probably sit there and talk all day if we wanted. But maybe next time we get together, her husband will be there too, because like I said, Lutchman is a great guy. It's his name, Lutchman. Is that cool or what? He's a great guy, and sorry I didn't get to see him last week. So that's the update. Next update, Flight 370. MH370 was a Malaysia Airlines flight originating in Kuala Lumpur. Its destination was Beijing, China. On the night of March 8th, 2014, while flying over the South China Sea, all of its communication equipment was shut off, making it invisible to air traffic control. An hour later, Malaysian military radar tracked the flight heading northwest up the Malacca Strait. Flight 370 was never seen again. The update here, the jet's still missing. All the rumors and theories continue. The update is there is a ship with remote vehicles on board right now headed out into the Indian Ocean to search once again. Hopefully you all have been following Jeff Wise's channel on YouTube. He's been documenting all of this. And essentially, basically, generally, what they're going to be doing is they're going to go out and check the fringes of the area, this big kind of rectangle area that was searched years ago. They're going to go to the fringes. Maybe they're going to take a look at a couple spots within there, but really just going to the same area that's already been searched, but it's just going to be more of the outlying areas, the border of that area, and really we're just talking percentages based on the pings and all of the information, the satellite pings and everything else that were going between the jet and satellites as it was flying somewhere. Of course, as Jeff Wise will tell you himself, those pings, those messages could be interpreted in a variety of ways, and in fact, they could even be faked. But they're going to give it another shot. They're going to go down into the South Indian Ocean, go to that general area, and put those remote vehicles down to the bottom and see what they can find. My prediction is they're not going to find anything. But that's an update. They're going to give it another shot. Next update, Billy DiSilvestro. This is another one I'm not sure he's ever been mentioned on an update episode, despite there now being 21 of them before this one. Not sure. I don't go back and check these things. William Francis DiSilvestro IV, Billy to those who loved him most, was a 28-year-old from Hamilton, Ohio. He loved tattoos and talking about God. On February 7th, 2011, he got a ride to a friend's home, one he hadn't seen in a while. The friend claims they partied, then he went to bed. When he woke up, Billy was gone. He was never seen again. The update is that remains were found coincidentally right after I did the last update episode. And so this article comes to you from late August of 2025, and I'm going to read it for you right now. To my knowledge, I don't think that they've proven who these remains are or not yet. Human bones were found in the sewer system in Hamilton, and the discovery is reopening wounds for local families who have missing loved ones. On Wednesday, a routine maintenance inspection in Hamilton led to the discovery of human bones. According to the Hamilton Police Department, the inspection was for a sewer system near the intersection of 3rd Street and Market Street. The discovery has many families wondering if they will finally get the answers they have been seeking. Debbie Estes has already called the coroner to get an understanding of how long it will be until there are results. Estes' son, Billy DeSilvestro, 28 years old, was last seen in Hamilton 14 years ago. Billy is a hard worker, a jokester, and he has a big heart, Estes said. For more than a decade, the closest she has come to sitting with her son is at a bench in Hamilton Plaza. Pictures and memories are all she has of him. She recalls the moment she learned he was missing. I got a phone call from my mother saying that the boy whose house Billy was at called and said that he left his phone and coat, Estes said. That's all I really know. Bill DeSilvestro was last seen on the west side of Hamilton, and that sliver of information is all Estes has been able to cling to. It's an ongoing pain. There's no stopping it, Estes said. It is a feeling and weight Estes knows. Cynthia Carmack, Billy Campbell, Todd Mathis, Kara Hyde, Estes said. Many of the wounds from these cases were ripped back open on Wednesday after the discovery of the human bones in a sewer in downtown Hamilton. Anytime remains are found, it's so overwhelming, Estes said. I can't keep my mind off of it. Is it him this time? Is this going to be my boy? So that's the article. I tried to follow up and see if they've been identified. I could find nothing. So for September, October, November, now here into December. So I guess it's still a mystery as to whose bones those are. But I don't know if Billy DeSilvestro has ever been mentioned in any other story regarding remains in Hamilton, Ohio, since he went missing in 2011. I have no idea, but happy to include him maybe for the first time in an update episode. Next update, we go from a disappearance that I don't think has ever been mentioned on Unfound to one that, on an update episode anyway, that go to one that gets mentioned almost every time. I think you know where I'm going. If you're following the chronology of how these disappearances have all been featured on Unfound, we go to Tom Brown. Thomas Kelly Brown was an 18-year-old from Canadian Texas. He was president of his class and loved acting and public speaking. On the night of November 23rd, 2016, Thomas was on his way home after hanging out with friends. He stopped to get gas in his Dodge Durango. He was never seen again. Of course, the Dodge Durango was found. And then eventually part of Tom was found in, what was it? It was early 2019, correct? So, the issue with this disappearance, I guess we call it death at this point, is that there's always something going on. There's always something going on. We probably could do an update, although it's not really necessarily an update. I want to tell you, nothing has changed. Despite a lot of talk, nothing has changed. But I think that I do at least have to bring up one point, and that was a post that the people at Klein Investigations and Consulting made on their Facebook page back on October 22nd. And I'm not going to read all of it because it's long, but it goes after, once again, that radio host, and anybody who doesn't, I don't say their names, that radio host at that radio station in Texas, along with that guest that has appeared on that radio show on that radio station. Phil Klein and company really go after, I guess they actually talked to the radio host, but they really go after the guest, and many of you know the person's name. I'm not saying it, but I'm just going to read a little bit of this. Like I said, it's several paragraphs. But part of this says, to remind over 500,000 people who will read this today, and there will not be, surely 500,000 people did not read this. Phil Klein's Klein Investigation and Consulting's has 28,000 followers on its page, so it is highly unlikely that 500,000 people read this post, even though that's what it says in the post. To remind the over 500,000 people who read this today, 500,000 people did not read this. We want to remind you who the host or the guest on that radio show is. This is a man who has played hopscotch throughout Texas as a used car salesman, a new car salesman. Oh, that sounds like me. 30-some years ago. And now a general manager at a car shop in Commerce, Texas. Furthermore, he was never a Navy SEAL or a Navy SEAL trainee, or for that matter, in any type of special forces. Furthermore, clearly he has no experience as a quote-unquote state investigator and only has quote-unquote bottle reading experience with the Texas Alcohol Beverage Commission for less than 18 months, meaning in our eyes he is nothing but a charlatan who lies, exaggerates who he is, and has attempted quote-unquote stolen valor with the United States Navy. Now, to my knowledge, this guest on that radio show has never been charged with anything about lying about his credentials. I'm not saying he's not lying. I don't know. But to my knowledge, this person who, his name has been used extensively, you can go find it for yourselves. Of course, stolen valor is what, a federal crime, right? I don't think he's been charged with anything. So, if you say you're a Navy SEAL, but you weren't, but you were in the Navy, is that stolen valor? I don't know. But this is what Klein Investigations and Consulting has written. To go further down here, skipping a couple paragraphs, just where Klein Investigations and Consulting said they actually spoke to that radio show host at that radio station, and they said they had, I guess, a productive conversation. A couple paragraphs down. The two autopsy reports show the same thing. Blunt force trauma to the head with the quote-unquote kill shot clearly shown post-mortem. I'll come back to that. Meaning the injury that killed Tom was inflicted, he was alive. Now, the newest lie that the guest puts out is that when the family found, quote-unquote, his body fell, and that is what caused his injury and death, and that is what the Texas OAG believes. It's not what the Texas OAG believes. Now that the body has two autopsies and both show quote-unquote post-mortem injuries, the theory is no longer viable. Meaning, if Tom's family found him dead and they cut him down from however he is said to have hung himself, the guest's theory, how did his injuries become post-mortem? And second, if he didn't hang himself, did he beat himself in the head? Well, I agonize with this. I so much agonize with it. You can hear it. I'm not going to edit any of my pauses out because this is agonizing to me. There was no kill shot. All right, that is sensationalism. There was no shot. When we talk about whoever wrote this, you need to put kill shot all in quotes, not just kill in quotes, if you're going to use your English language correctly. There was no shot. There was a shot into Janelle Matthews' head because it was a .38 caliber bullet that was found in her skull 35 years later. There was no shot to Tom Brown, and so you need to put that in quotations too. That is, what is that? Figurative language, that's why you do that, or something like that. So there was no kill shot. First of all, second of all, we have to remember that only part of Tom was found. No explanation for that. 35%, right? No explanation. What's the explanation for that? My explanation is because we have all those hogs running around Texas. I know this sucks. It sucks that I have to talk about this like this. But is it not possible that Tom died out there all on his own and some animals came along and took him apart, and one of these animals dragged him away, and his head hit into a rock as his body was being dragged. Is that not possible? As far as the OAG, we know what they think. We heard it, or I heard it. A few people heard it. Most of you did not hear it. I heard it. Of course, this was the recording that Nathan Lewis did, and unethically. I don't know if it was illegal or immoral, but it certainly wasn't unethical. And in there, it's very clear that the OAG's office in Texas thinks that this was a suicide. I don't know if they ever have gotten into specifically how that happened, as it seems to infer in this particular paragraph. But I don't think that the OAG, once again, to read this. Now, the newest lie that the guest puts out is that when the family found, quote unquote, his body fell, and I mean, it was part of his body. His body fell, and that's what caused his injury and death, and that is what the Texas OAG believes. Does the OAG really believe that Tom's family was involved in all of this? That's news to me. At least that's the way it's written here. And now to continue again, now that the body has 2 autopsies and both show quote unquote postmortem injuries, that theory is no longer viable. Any theory other than UFOs is still viable. This is what we call confirmation bias. You want it to be something, so anything that comes up, you think it goes along with what you think. Now, I would add one more thing to all of this. Let me see if I really want to read any more of this. It says, we are done with this fake, false, and outrageous behavior by mentally ill man, meaning the radio show guest, who only wants to hurt others like the Meeks, Tom's friends, and the community at large. Telling everyone that you work with you are a Navy SEAL, then caught lying by the real Navy SEALs is one thing. Another is hurting a family that lost their son. I don't know about any of that. I will end with this. A lot of making fun of a car salesman in this write-up from October 22nd of 2025 by Klein Investigations and Consulting. Well, here's one thing I know. I'm not going to include all car salesmen and all private investigators in this comment, but there is one thing that most car salesmen and most private investigators have in common. You know what that is? In neither profession have most of them solved any disappearances. Maybe I should include one more thing. And some of you already know that I've started to do this with some of the work that I've been doing, asking ChatGPT about certain items. For example, very recently, being that we revisited the Marco Island 3, I asked ChatGPT version 5.2. I asked, is it possible that Jeff Wandich could have swum those 2 to 3 miles to that buoy where he was saved? And I posted what ChatGPT's response was, and it found it to be very, 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 very unlikely. So I asked ChatGPT, is there any proof that private investigator Phil Klein has ever solved any disappearances? According to ChatGPT, I'll just read it. There are some specific media reports that connect Klein to outcomes in missing persons cases. Sabrina Allen case found after 12 years. I'm just reading what ChatGPT says. If Klein Investigation and Consulting or anybody else has any problem with this, you can go talk to ChatGPT. The Sabrina Allen case found after 12 years. Klein was involved in the cold case of missing child Sabrina Allen and is widely credited in news reporting as having helped find her in Mexico and bring her home, where authorities also made a criminal charge against the non-custodial parent. This one has independent news coverage, ABC affiliate story, though note details of exactly what investigative actions he took versus law enforcement actions may vary in how they're described. This is the best publicly documented instance of him being connected to a disappearance that reached a resolution reported in mainstream media. It also documents, of course, D.R. Kuntz Jr., Jr.'s disappearance, where it says Klein was hired and later withdrew from the case. No resolution was reached, and the child remains missing. The Michael Chambers case, Klein was publicly involved in investigating the disappearance and talked about the case on a podcast. But as of available information, the case remains unsolved. Further down here, ChatGPT says, many PI claims, just in general, are promotional and may not be audited by independent entities unless tied to a specific documented case outcome reported by credible outlets. I want to read that again, the first part. Many PI claims are promotional. And the summary says, yes, there's at least one documented case, Sabrina Allen, where Philip Klein's involvement is tied to the eventual locating, returning of a missing person in a way reported by reputable news media. No, there is not a broad, independently verified list of cases solved, quote unquote, with clear evidence for many disappearances. Some high-profile cases he's worked on remain unsolved publicly or were withdrawn. So, if that's not true, Klein investigating and consulting, I would go talk to ChatGPT about that. And maybe one more thing. I keep saying one more thing. My attitude continues to be, it very well may be that Tom Brown was murdered. I don't believe that. But it very well may end up being true. But I still insist, if I live to be 85, 30 years from now, we're still never going to know for sure what happened to him. I continue to insist that, just so you know. Next update, Leah Peebles. Once again, might be the first time for Leah on here. Leah Rochelle Peebles was a 23-year-old from Albuquerque, New Mexico. She was originally from Fort Worth, Texas, and liked to write in her journal. On May 22nd, 2006, she wrecked her car, and it had to be towed. The next day, Leah showed up at the garage with a man and a woman to check the car's status. She was never seen again. Really don't really know how much I can say about this, but my assistant Emily, all of you know Emily, she's been part of Unfound for like 8.5 years now. She's kind of busy these days, doesn't get to reach out to families as much as she used to. Totally fine. She has her life to live. Very, very happy with her. And if you'll remember, I got to finally meet her in person earlier this year. Emily has taken a personal interest in Leah's disappearance and has been doing a little work on it. I think that's all I can say for now. But totally on her own. I did not make a recommendation, a suggestion, put it in her ear, nothing. She did this totally independently. And I want to really thank her for that. And I do think that she has had some contact with Leah's mother in regards to all of this. Just thought you'd want to know. Next, disappearances, plural, Molly Miller and Colt Haynes. This is more of just a comment for this one. Molly Miller and Colt Haynes were respectively 17 and 21 years old, and they were from Wilson, Oklahoma. They'd only known each other a week, but might have been headed toward a relationship. On the evening of July 7th, 2013, Molly and Colt were passengers in a car that got involved in a police chase. The vehicle got ditched, and the driver made it back to his house the next morning, while Molly and Colt seemingly got lost, trying to call friends to come pick them up. They were never seen again. The reason I feel compelled to mention in this episode, this update episode, number 22, is because it comes up so much between me and Dee, a listener who has her own show on Thursday nights where I make an appearance and we do trivia and talk about a lot of different things. But their disappearances frequently pop up when we talk, and probably, if only for the reason that Dee lives in Oklahoma. I think I can say that. So I continue to think that this entire disappearance, the investigation, and being that I just talked about Tom Brown a few minutes ago. I think this investigation is even more off the rails than Tom Brown's is. You know, I can say that. So put this on a scale. This is where I am on this. After all these years, and it's now over 12 years, and there's just something about what people want to believe happened out there that night that, I'm not saying it doesn't make sense. It's just not statistically probable. I still have a hard time understanding why they could be calling people to come pick them up and nobody could find them. And I keep insisting that, okay, even if it's dark, even if they don't know the area that well, all the two of them had to do, they had their phones, obviously, that even in 2013 terms would have flashlights on them. Even if one of them, lost its battery, maybe the other, Molly could use Colt's phone, Colt could use Molly's phone. All they had to do is follow the tire tracks back out to the main road. Remember that the car was going through fields and everything else. That's all you'd have to do to make it back to the main road. And they couldn't do that even when the sun came up the next day. Because remember, they were making calls after the sun came up. Of course, July, the sun comes up pretty early. 6 in the morning or something? They were talking to people after that. They couldn't find their way out of there. Yeah. If it were me, I would go back to the complete basics on this disappearance, if anybody is interested. And forget everything that has been said and has been done to this point. This is the idea that, and I've mentioned this to Dee, and I think even Dee might be on board with me on this. Of course, she has her own ideas. She's very smart, intuitive, she's very knowledgeable. But we talk about it so much, I thought I needed to mention it here, and this is what comes up into my mind every time she and I discuss it. Totally wipe the chalkboard clean and start over, as if you don't know anything about this disappearance. It's probably what's best right now going into 2026. Next update, Trevor Nichols. Trevor Michael Nichols was a 24-year-old from Fort Drum, New York. He was a specialist in the Army and a father. On November 15th, 2017, Trevor did not show up for morning drills. Nobody could find him. 2 days later, a fellow soldier allegedly located Trevor and watched as Trevor got on an Amtrak train in Syracuse headed toward Cleveland. He was never seen again. Now, most of you know Trevor was eventually discovered to be alive living in San Diego, and then I think you also know in a previous update episode, he has gone home to his family. And I should say, that opening paragraph, I think there was some doubt when we actually did cover Trevor's disappearance. What was it, 2020, something like that? That might not have happened. I'm actually inclined to believe now that I think that opening paragraph is true, that somebody really did see him get on an Amtrak train. And we got into the video. What did the video show? Did it show him getting on the train and there was no video, or it didn't show him, or whatever? I think now that I know what the outcome is, I think that did happen, if you're wondering. But Trevor had to spend a little time with the military again in a confinement situation for a while. But he is now back with his family, and just within the last 2 months, I had a back and forth with his mother, who was the guest back then when he was still missing. And I don't want to go into everything that was said. I can't do that. But Trevor is doing well. That's what she told me. He is back at home, and he has plans for his future. If you follow her on Facebook, you can see her posting pictures of Trevor. In fact, I think she got pictures of when he actually did come home, flew home. She even got pictures from that. And it's a real good story. It's a very, very good outcome to all of this. And I'm still hoping, if it never happens, totally fine. I'd still love to talk to Trevor about this. I still think, given his experience being missing from 2017 until, I guess, 2024 at least, being homeless and what was going on in his head and everything, I'd still love to get into that with him. And his mother knows that. I've not ever spoken to him, period. Not one word. But I've mentioned this to his mother. Of course, she, I guess, will be the final decider on whether that happens or not. Totally fine to me. Whether she thinks it's healthy for her son. Of course, he's a grown man getting back on his feet, but she'll surely have something to say about that. But I would certainly like to do that. I think that would help all of us understand this type of disappearance and what does it take for a young man, young woman who is left and might be homeless or whatever. What does it take for that person to eventually come home? I think that might be helpful. But he's doing well. Love seeing pictures of him with his family on Facebook. One of the true great stories of the past 9+ years that Unfound has covered, where disappearance is unsolved and then it gets solved in the best of ways. Next update, Janelle Matthews. Janelle Matthews was a 12-year-old from Greeley, Colorado. She was in the chorus and had an older sister. On December 20th, 1984, Janelle was dropped off at her house after a concert. There was no one home. When her father arrived an hour later, Janelle wasn't there. She was never seen again. Her remains were found in July 2019, 35 years after her disappearance. There is an update that I want to pass along to you. But being that I just referenced ChatGPT some minutes ago, asking it about Phil Klein, I in all fairness, I asked ChatGPT about myself. I think this is the first time I've ever done this. And I asked it the question, did podcaster Ed Dentzel take part in a murder trial? And you should know ChatGPT got the information exactly correct. It says, and you can, of course, if you have ChatGPT, you can ask it the same question so you know that I'm telling the truth when I read all of this. Yes, podcaster Ed Dentzel did take part in a murder trial, but not as a defendant. He participated as a witness due to his involvement in a case he covered on his podcast. What happened? Ed Dentzel is the host of the true crime missing persons podcast Unfound. During the investigation and eventual prosecution of Steve Pankey for the 1984 murder and kidnapping of 12-year-old Janelle Matthews, a cold case in Greeley, Colorado, Dentzel conducted a long interview with Pankey that prosecutors ended up playing during the trial. As a result, Dentzel testified in the trial. His podcast interview with Pankey was introduced as evidence, and he appeared to answer questions about that interview. Outcome of the case. The first jury in the Pankey trial in 2021 ended in a hung jury. But in a 2022 retrial, Pankey was convicted of the murder. Dentzel's interview was part of the prosecution's presentation. How Dentzel has described it. In interviews about his work, Dentzel has said he has testified in a murder trial more than once because of coverage he's done for the podcast. So in short, yes, Ed Dentzel appeared in court and testified as a witness in a murder trial related to his work interviewing a suspect on his podcast. So ChatGPT gets that part. That's, like I said, that's the only time I've ever asked it about myself. Got it exactly correct. So I'm inclined to think that ChatGPT gets a lot of things involving true crime and missing persons cases correct. This will be something that I'll continue to test in 2026. So just wanted to do that, by way of contrasting and comparing to what I did a few minutes ago. So regarding Janelle Matthews, and Steve Pankey, I continued to communicate with Steve, and we did have a period there where no letters went back and forth, but I did get one from him. I think it was dated November 21st is when he wrote it, and he continues to work on his appeal, and I'll just read what he said. I happen to have the letter right here. He goes, my attorney's opening brief is 54 pages long. Twice the judge said this case is likely to be reversed on appeal. I was convicted on innuendo, not facts. The state's star witness is dead, and by that Steve means his ex-wife. In 1 to 2 years, the Court of Appeals will decide. 5 state witnesses have died. Will there be a third trial? And he has a question mark. So he seems to think that this is going pretty well. Is Steve going to live 1 or 2 more years to see this come to fruition? I have no idea. Remember, he is not a youngster, but it seems to be going well. I've never spoken to his attorney. The only attorney that has ever represented him that had any communication with me was his first one in the first trial. Now, I'm not sure I'm happy or sad or whatever regarding this, the actual process, but I did speak to a lawyer earlier this year. Remember, I got a lot. I don't know if it's everything, but a lot of the pretrial materials from the first trial. And I have gone through all of them, and I was surely hoping to do a podcast or even a series on it because, wow, it's been eye-opening. That's all I can say. But I have been advised to stay away from it for now by a lawyer who I had a consultation with this guy earlier this year, and I told him what it was and even sent some of it to him. Of course, attorney-client privilege. He's not going to make it public, but he wanted to give me good advice, so he needed to see what I had. And his advice is, for now, being that there's an appeals process going on in Colorado, you should probably not make this stuff public. You should not talk about it, or anything. So I'm following that. But however long this appeals process takes, depending, of course, what goes on. Of course, the appeal is successful and there's another trial, and then that would even put off more me revealing the information that I got. Of course, if the appeal goes nowhere and it's denied and Steve is certainly stuck in jail, no more trials, nothing for the rest of his life, then at that point, I think I will be free and clear to talk about what's in these materials. But I'm telling you, I hate, it's eye-opening. I know it seems like a tease and everything else, but I want you to know that I've looked at all of it. But I think all of you know me by now. I am not a sensationalist. I do not build things up to get you all excited about it, just to get listeners and views and everything else. And then when it's something, it's just that. I don't do that. Ever. So when I say that it was eye-opening, you need to believe that it was absolutely eye-opening, what I read. So, but I just can't talk about it in detail and go over all of it at this time. Maybe a year from now. We'll just have to see. But the appeals process for Steve Pankey continues. I don't know if all of you are happy about that. I know a lot of you think he's guilty. A lot of you think he's not guilty, and maybe some of you are with me that just simply, I don't think the prosecution proved its case, even though I was part of the prosecution presentation, as ChatGPT accurately says. It's just weird how these things work out sometimes. But I know everybody's all over the map on Steve and what actually happened that night. So we'll just have to wait. You're just going to have to be patient. And trust me, it's killing me too. But we got to follow the law. Next update. Julie Weflin, and I cannot even begin to tell you before I even get into this how much this is going to pain me. Julianne Weflin was a 28-year-old from Deer Park, Washington. She worked for the Bonneville Power Administration and loved the outdoors. On September 16th, 1987, on her way home, Julie stopped at a substation to make sure it was working correctly. Julie never made it home. She was never seen again. First, why does this one pain me? It's because the guy who was the guest, some of you may remember, his name was John Polos. He was a co-worker of Julie's. He admits not knowing her overtly well back at the time, but certainly a co-worker of hers. And I've certainly used John as an example of how somebody who's not connected to a family, but an amateur, not a licensed private investigator or a podcast or YouTube or anybody else, can just get involved and be interested, devote a lot of their spare time to this. And John, you should know, is not a youngster. He's like in his late 70s now. I think he's still teaching high school or something. And I want you to know, I like John. But the reason this is going to pain me is because just recently, it just kind of came to a head for me and some exchanges that John and I had. And I would admit, kind of went off on him a little bit, not yelling or anything, but being very critical about the work that he's doing. In fact, I didn't even put it in an email. I actually recorded it on my phone and sent it as an MP3 file, like 15 minutes long. Not demeaning him or anything, but trying to talk to some sense to him. So that pain, you do not know, and if John is out there, how much it pained me that I had to do that. And it also pains me, though, that I have to talk to all of you about it now, because this is not something I would normally do. But I think this is a good example of where everybody, including myself, can learn something. If we keep these things kind of hidden and just one-on-one, then there is the opportunity for these kind of choices and mistakes to continue to spread. And my job, one of my jobs, is to try to stop this stuff. And so then I have to tell you about what I said to him and what went on, hoping you, should you want to get involved in a disappearance, not do this type of stuff. John is not like way, way, way off in the reservation. He's not in Kookville, conspiracy land or anything. But I think, as I'm going to explain, this is how you like gradually get off in the wrong direction. No, it's not one huge big step where, you know, it's just a series of small steps. And so here's, unfortunately, this is like going to be the longest update, I think, of all of them. And it's going to take me a little while because I have to take you back to how this all got started. It's just not simply, well, here's an update. I need to go back to when John really first jumped in with both feet back in 2011, 2012. And in fact, it's easy to chart because he got local media coverage because of it. You remember that John wanted to get involved, try to figure out what, happened to Julie. And what he did was he went out. One of the things he did is he went out, and back then, 13, 14 years ago, given that it happened at this particular substation or whatever they call it, you remember Julie was out there. She essentially volunteered almost to go out and check and see what was going on at this place on her way home, and then she got attacked by someone or some people. Certainly, very much like Jody Huisentruit, is that there was stuff strewn all over the place, and she's gone. And so what John did, along with somebody else who was helping him, they went out there and they actually, so this would have been 24 years, 25 years after it even happened. They went out there and just for a while counted the cars. How busy is it out there? And I don't know how the population has changed. But what they also did was they sent out a flyer to all the people who live in that area and asked them, it was a questionnaire, but essentially to really break it down just to the simplest way, it was, a woman got, for the BPA, got attacked right down the street. If you were to think that somebody nearby could have done this, who would that be? Those are my words. That's not exactly what was in the questionnaire. In fact, it was multiple questions. But certainly that was a large part of it. That's why they were doing it. They were trying to figure out, well, is there anybody in this area who could have been in this area because they live in the area? This person lives in the area and attacked Julie. Well, it was quite a few people, but it was not everybody. I don't even know if it was a majority. A lot of people were given this questionnaire. But the name that came up the most was a guy whose name, and if you know the disappearance well, his name was Will Parks. And the reason John was eventually on the podcast is because we had to wait until Will Parks died. And he died, I think he had a heart attack while driving or choked on something. He died. And that's when John felt comfortable coming on, because he thought if he did it before that he might get sued by Will. So it was on the strength of this questionnaire that back in 2011, 2012, many years ago now, John got on the path of Will Parks. That he most likely did this. Now, you can already see the flaw. And like I said, even when John was on the podcast back in 2020, whenever it was, I told him this. It's essentially, all you really did was ask everybody which neighbor do they hate the most. That's all that came out of this. They had no knowledge of Will Parks ever attacking anybody, ever harming anybody. They just didn't like Will Parks because I guess he had a reputation for being an SOB in the area. Well, you can be an SOB in the area and never harm anybody, man or woman. This is how the flaws start. But then because John thought that he was onto something here, he started looking into this. Well, then let's see if we can figure out if Will and Julie knew each other. And he allegedly did, but then years later, even after he was on the podcast, it was figured out that probably they didn't. This whole mountaineering or hiking club, that maybe he might have been in it, but Julie might not have been in it, or it's the opposite. She was in it and he wasn't, where they could have run across each other. And you should also know that of course, with Deborah Swanson, who went missing in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, around that time, was it before or after? I think it was before, that John Polos, guest of Unfound, has also tried to connect Will Parks to her disappearance as well. And in fact, that came out earlier this year when I had the author of that book who wrote about all these disappearances. Remember, he was on. Maybe you want to go back and listen to that. But just sticking with Julie. So this whole time, he's been trying to prove that Will Parks did this. And I've always insisted, I think this methodology is flawed. Well, there's always been this talk that there is this diary out there done by Julie's stepmother, not her mother, but stepmother, in which it says that Julie actually talked to one of her coworkers about Will Parks. Well, if she had, certainly that would be something. But this diary, seemingly nobody could find it. Well, somebody did end up finding it recently. And you'd think, well, that's really good news. And of course, John, very excited about this. And in it, and he did take pictures of the page and send them to me. So I got to read it for myself in the stepmother's own handwriting. But here's where problems start. And this is really, really, really what eventually led me to making that 15-minute recording and sending it to John. The problem with this is that this other co-worker who was much older than Julie didn't come and mention Will Parks. So what this guy says, it's not John, it's somebody else. This guy, unfortunately, is deceased now, so we can't even question him. Although John did question him before he died, and I'll get into that. What this guy said coming forward, he said that back in the 1980s, he claims that Julie said to him that before Julie and her husband met, she and Will Parks had dated. Well, Julie met her husband, I think, in 1980. They married in 1983. They were married for like 4 years when she went missing. So allegedly, Julie was in a relationship with Will Parks at least 7 years before she went missing. And that she told this guy that Will Parks had been bothering her. This is what he said much later. Well, it seems there is no proof that this guy who seemingly Julie was confiding in ever said anything about this until 2012. And even more importantly, he didn't bring this up until John Polos, guest of Unfound, started doing his work and happened upon Will Parks, once again by the questionnaire. And then in the process of John, of course, talking to a lot of people, who used to work with Bonneville, he ended up talking to this guy who then at that point went and mentioned Will Parks to the stepmother. So there's no proof that Will Parks' name was ever in this guy's head until John Polos started talking about Will Parks through this questionnaire that he conducted, that he made in 2011. And John, unfortunately, thinks that this is proof that this is all true, that Will Parks did this. And John doesn't see that this is not an independent source. It very well could be that this other employee who says Julie confided in him could be completely making everything up. And in fact, it's overwhelmingly likely, given that he never mentioned Will Parks seemingly to anybody, including the police, until 2012. Because it's clear to me, remember, you have to go back, to the time when Julie went missing, that her husband put a lot of work into this. Now, gradually, eventually, he moved on with his life. And he doesn't talk about Julie at all these days, my understanding. I don't think John Polos or anybody else has been able to talk to him about Julie's disappearance at all. But at the time, you can see the media articles, the husband did quite a bit, and he is not a suspect in her disappearance. Well, you would think, given that he worked on it at least for a few years, you'd think Will Parks' name would have come out of Julie's husband's mouth back then. It didn't. What are we saying? That Julie confided in a coworker about Will Parks stalking her, but she never told her husband? She never told him about allegedly an ex-boyfriend, Will Parks, who was stalking her or bothering her or anything else, because it would seem that's all the husband would have had to have done back then. But it's pretty clear that nobody knew about Will Parks until John Polos came along. How is that possible? I hope I'm explaining this very well. I hope. It's a little convoluted. I understand that. But it's clear to me that nobody knew about Will Parks until John Poulos came along in 2011. Yet this co-worker of Julie's, who was like her supervisor, is saying, oh yeah, she mentioned to me that she was having problems with him. But he never said this until 2012 after John Poulos already started bringing up Will Parks' name. And John admits that he spoke to this guy and probably mentioned Will Parks' name. Now, I brought this up to John, and of course his attitude is that, well, this guy, this coworker, this supervisor of Julie's, very trustworthy. Why would he lie? All of the stuff that you hear in all of these disappearances where you end up finding out these people don't know what they're talking about. The problem is that John Poulos doesn't have 300-some cases of experience like I do, or like many of you do, listening to Unfound every week and hearing about stories that seem true that eventually go nowhere. This is about, as far as within Unfound's catalog of cases, this is about the best example of confirmation bias that can be seen, that has been exposed. I would also say this. We also have to think of it this way. The odds that anybody, John Poulos or anybody, would go out, put out this questionnaire, and Will Parks' name come up, and this just happens to be a guy that Julie Weflin dated 7 years before this. The odds of those both coming together are like Powerball, winning the Powerball jackpot odds. It's like 1 in 292 million. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you know what I mean. John Poulos just goes out there with a questionnaire, just randomly asks a question, and that name pops up, and that just happens to be in the area where this guy lives, and he just happens to be one of Julie Weflin's ex-boyfriends. It's so unlikely. It's so unlikely. And like I said, you don't know how many minutes I sat there debating whether I needed to do this before I sent this. And it's a respect thing. You know, John is over 20 years older than I am, so there is kind of an elder respect thing. All of this work that he's put into it and everything. But I also realize at some point I do this as my work. And this would be no different than an engineer who's been building bridges for 9 years, sees a new engineer get involved, and, putting, plans for a new bridge, and you're looking at it and saying, that's not going to work. What would an experienced engineer be expected to do? He'd be expected to tell that new engineer, you know what, I think you're off on the wrong path on this. I don't think that that's going to work out. Right? Because I'm a professional now. I've been doing this a little bit. I've shown the ability to predict the resolutions to disappearances with 90-some% accuracy. At some point, that has to start meaning something. And I have to put that to work instead of just saying, well, this is the statistic. And so I had to do that. And I don't think that I really, like I said, I think John is a good guy. He's probably a spectacular teacher wherever I'm not even sure I know what he teaches. But I'm sure he's a spectacular teacher. I'm sure the students respect him. I'm guessing he's a great husband. I think he has kids, all of that. But this is business. And so I had to do that to him. And now I have to tell all of you this, because if you're going to get involved in a disappearance and take it up in your small spare time, you have to be careful of things like this. And even on top of that, being that going back to Cameron Remmer in 2019 and recently here in this year of 2025 with Cynthia Anderson, that I continue to work in the background. I've already talked about that. And then Eric and I working on with the Coast Guard, with Teresa Hickman, Angela Westbury. One of the things we're always doing, or I'm always doing, or Eric's always doing, or we're doing it together, is checking to make sure we're not straying away from the source material. Is this stuff concretely true? Did we come to this piece of information in a way that is scientific? And for John, I just don't think that that's happened. I think he went out there looking for a bad guy out there where Julie got abducted, and he found one. Just because the neighbors don't like Will Parks. He may be totally had been the worst neighbor in the world. That doesn't mean he killed anybody. Whether it's Julie, Deborah Swanson, Catherine Gregory, and that was the other part of it I guess I have to mention. The other thing that kind of set me off, and the reason that I know that John has gotten so far away, is he sent me a letter that he sent to the Spokane County Sheriff's Office in regards to all of this. And in it, he said that there is a 50-50 chance that Will Parks caused the disappearance of Catherine Gregory. Now, we'd have to get into that. And once again, you'd have to look up that disappearance. We've not covered it specifically, only tangentially, with Julie's disappearance back in 2020, and then more recently due to Catherine being featured in that book. But John and I have talked about Catherine Gregory's disappearance. And I thought he agreed with me after talking to him that, yeah, the odds of Will Parks causing Catherine Gregory's disappearance are very, very, very low. It's not zero, but it's like less than 1%. And if you go look at Catherine Gregory's disappearance, I think you're going to agree with me. Most likely, her husband did it. For all the reasons that we talk about husbands, being liable or likely suspects in these disappearances. No different than Rosemary Rapp and Angela Green and everybody else, every other married woman we've featured on Unfound over the past 9 years. Same reasons. But John's telling the Spokane County Sheriff's Office, yeah, there's a 50-50 chance that Will Parks did it. Just this year, he said that to him. Even after John and I have had multiple conversations, starting back in 2020 about Catherine Gregory, where I've told him, the odds, and here are the reasons that it's not likely that Will Parks did it. And then he turns around and says that to the cops. This is stuff that I would urge you to stay away from. This kind of investigation and accumulation of information. I know it sucks that I have to do this and make it public like this, but that's the only way to stop it, by telling you all of you about it, in case you're thinking about getting involved in something. So that's that. I doubt this coworker of Julie's regarding Will Parks, because the guy didn't come forward for 25 years. And Will Parks' name was already out there. And in fact, as I told John, all this does is make me more suspicious that this coworker might have caused Julie's disappearance, that he just comes out of the woodwork and seems so eager to jump on the Will Parks bandwagon. So it's just as you can hear my voice, I'm pained by this. I am pained by this. So that is the update. Confirmation bias regarding Will Parks. Will Parks, I'm left thinking, certainly his neighbors didn't like him. That's how he ended up on this list. But that doesn't mean he killed anybody. There's no proof the two knew each other. You just can't go by one person's word 25 years later. It's obvious that the husband didn't know anything about Will Parks, or that would have been, he never mentions Will Parks in any of the documentation. Will Parks was never asked about Julie's disappearance, on and on and on. So, and I think for all you women out there, being that this audience is 80% women, surely if you're married and you had some ex-boyfriend stalking you, you would tell your husband about it, right? It's clear that Julie Weflin's husband didn't know anything about this. Didn't know anything about Will Parks. And I will, just to reduce this to the simplest point, the odds that Julie's out there, nobody knew she was going to be out there. The odds that Will Parks drove by, saw his ex-girlfriend working there, pulled in and abducted her and killed her is about as unlikely can be. Moving on. Next update, Kayleen Oling. Kayleen Marie Oling was a 20-year-old from Etna, Pennsylvania. She was a tomboy who liked working on cars with her dad. In the early morning of January 10th, 2020, Kayleen walked away from her friend's house to meet a much older man who had been in a relationship with her. She was never seen again. Well, you might remember from 2 years ago, I think over 2 years ago now, 2023, Kayleen's remains were found, and the update is still nothing has been determined that I could find any cause of death. You might remember that it was found, she was found, her remains were found in a little patch of woods in an area where I guess there aren't a lot of woods around, considering that it's Pittsburgh. So, still searching for answers, specific answers regarding why she is now deceased. Of course, her family believes that she was murdered. I'm not saying that couldn't have happened. It's still undetermined. I don't think we're yet to a point with this that it's like Tom Brown's, where we're never going to know. And certainly when it comes to foul play, I think foul play is much more likely in Kayleen's than it is in Tom's. But still very unclear. We're not to the point where it might not be proven that it was foul play, but if it goes a couple more years, maybe we have to start thinking that. So still nothing. Still no cause of death, at least anything that's been made public. Next update, Chance Leslie Engelbert. Chance Engelbert was a 25-year-old from Moorcroft, Wyoming. He was a married father and was in the process of changing careers. On July 6th, 2019, while in Gering, Nebraska, Chance walked off after getting into a disagreement with his wife's family, his in-laws. An hour later, Chance was caught on video walking by himself. He was never seen again. Many of you who follow the podcast know where I'm going with this one. Chance's remains were found in September. What I would call by accident. They were not found due to any purposeful search. Yeah, purposeful search due to people going out there and trying to find Chance. He was found by accident. Was it by hikers? Was it by hunters? People on ATVs? I forget, but I didn't put it in my notes here. But most importantly, found by accident. It's fairly clear to me that there was no foul play given the circumstances of the remains being found and where they were found. But it very well could be that maybe people in his family are still thinking that, something of a violent nature, foul play could have happened. That's not what I'm inclined to think with this. From the beginning, although in some particular points I got wrong, but certainly I thought that he was going to be found in the area, which he was. If you'll remember, I had made the prediction back then that I thought that he really did try to walk back to Wyoming from Nebraska. I think that was his intention. And I thought that he might have gotten washed away in a flash flood by trying to cross a river. And you can go back and you can find the YouTube video, the map analysis I did a few years ago regarding that. Whereas it seems his remains were found a little like west, almost due west from where he was last seen on video. It doesn't seem that his remains were, of course, hidden in any way. For example, somebody murdered him and buried him or something like that. Nothing like that. Very sad. This is a disappearance that didn't need to happen. I think there might have been some drinking that was going on before this all came to fruition with him walking off, and nobody denies that he walked off because there was, two different videos, two different locations that found him that where we see through the camera's eyes him walking around by himself. No allegations he was being followed or being chased, nothing like that. And I have to believe he really was thinking about going back to Wyoming. I'm not inclined to think that he was necessarily suicidal, but you start mixing alcohol in with arguments, who knows where people's minds go. But his remains were found. I'm going to guess it's even, it's been how long? It's been 3 months since this happened. I'm guessing they're trying to dot their I's and cross their T's on all of this. But I think this was just a horrible accident that didn't have to happen. Did he try to climb something? You might remember that there was a really bad storm that was rolling in there. Did he try to seek cover? Did he get hit by a falling limb? And I know how that can be. I was out, how many years ago was it now? Must have been like 2017 or 2018 in Orlando. I got caught out on a disc golf course by myself, far from the parking lot, when a storm rolled in, one of the few times that's ever happened. And a limb fell off the tree like 30 feet away. And if it had hit me, I'd be dead. That's how big it was. Of course, it doesn't take much. Limb doesn't have to be, 2 tons to hit you. It doesn't take much. If it comes down right on top of your head, a limb of any kind of weight, you're dead. So I'm open to that idea with chance. And, of course, any being that this happened way back in 2019, 6 years ago, any remnants of that limb or something that could have hit him would be long gone, would have decomposed by now. So I'm open to that. A lot of different things could have happened here, but I'm not thinking foul play is a very likely choice. And I am giving myself credit for getting this one right, because there were people thinking that it was foul play, and it was at least a little bit up in the air. I think this is just an accident waiting to happen. Somebody angry, drunk, talking about walking back to Wyoming from Nebraska. This sounds like a recipe for something bad to happen. And I guess it did. Very sad. Very sad. Next update, Julianne Gillet. Julianne Cecilia Gillet was a 36-year-old from Bellevue, Washington. She was the mother of one and loved Fleetwood Mac. In late May of 1985, Julianne's parents lost contact with her. 3 weeks later, Julianne's husband told everyone she had left him. She was never seen again. I will add in that you might remember that her purse was eventually found on one of the top floors in a hotel like many, many, many miles away from Bellevue, Washington. Maybe it was even in Reno or somewhere, but it was a long ways away. And the update for this is kind of what the update was at the end of August, is that her daughter, who was the guest for that episode, continues to work very hard in all of this, and having communications with police and other people trying to get to the bottom of this. As you would imagine, Julianne's husband, I think, continues to be the main suspect. He is still alive, by the way. But the other update would be that I actually got to speak to Julianne's daughter. I even have it in my notes here on October 23rd. And of course, I can't go into what we discussed. All of these guests know that once they appear on the podcast, that everything goes back to being off the record. I realize that I'm a reporter, but I'm really here to give good advice, and sometimes that advice has to be off the record, and these guests need to know that, I'm not just talking to them so I can, then go right to the microphone. Here's what I talked to, In this case, of course, Julianne's daughter's name is Tamara. So I can go right back to the microphone to say what we talked about. That is not good. That's not very ethical. So she and I spoke. We had a great conversation. Tamara and I continue to have a very good relationship that way. And she comes to me. And, I give her my best advice and my insights and everything else. So she continues to work at it. Some very interesting points came up in our last conversation. And if there's one thing maybe I think I can say without speaking out of school is that for all of you families out there, you don't need to tell the police what you're doing. Don't feel obligated when you're going to do something or go somewhere and talk to somebody or do a search or go online to look people up or whatever. You have no obligation to tell the police what you're doing at all. Zero. Just don't do anything illegal. I continue to say that, and don't do anything that's going to get you in trouble with the law. But you are not obligated, if you're taking on this investigation yourself and you come up with your own plan and you think it's a good plan, you don't need to tell the police. Probably they're just going to get in the way anyway. But just something that comes to mind when I think about talking to Tamara a few months ago. Can't go into the specifics. But remember that. This is a free country, the United States. As long as you're not breaking the law, do whatever you want. Not hurting anybody. If you have a plan, put the plan to use. I fully support that. Next update, Kevin Newen. Kevin Newen was a 25-year-old from Fort Wayne, Indiana. He was a college student and avid gamer. In the early morning of December 9th, 2018, Kevin got kicked out of a bar after acting strangely and getting into fights with the bouncers, allegedly. Kevin was then seen on video walking in the direction of his house. He was never seen again. The update here, technically nothing going on with the investigation or anything, but coincidentally, and his name has already been mentioned in this episode, this update episode, my assistant Eric now lives in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So even though Eric's surely busy with some things that I've already discussed in this update episode, maybe somewhere down the road now that he is making his home there, I'm very happy for him, for Eric. Maybe that's going to be something that now that he's local, we can work on a little bit more. Unfortunately, I think with Kevin's disappearance that something was going on with him last night, or that night, and he was walking home, and he had to walk across a bridge over a river. And you know how I feel about that, what I think about that. We've had some disappearances where we certainly think that is what happened. I'm inclined to think that. I realize that his family and others think otherwise, that, could it be these bouncers tracked him down, followed him? I guess there's nothing to rule that out. I don't think there's any scientific information to rule that in, rule that out. It just doesn't seem very likely to me. So maybe Eric and I sometime in the future when we get all these other things resolved that I've already mentioned, maybe that will become a priority. The other point is that just recently, within the last maybe 3 weeks, the guest for that episode, a blogger, his name's Brett, was the guest. He's only ever appeared on Unfound once, and it was for this disappearance. I thought he did a great job. He texted me out of nowhere, and it was good to hear from him. And I did tell him that Eric now lives there, but Brett does not live there. I know where he lives, but that's none of your business. But he got in contact with me, so I don't know if we do something in the future to involve Brett, I have no problem doing that, even though he doesn't live in the area. So it was good to hear from Brett. I have to think that maybe he and I had not spoken back and forth since he appeared on Unfound. That's nothing against him and nothing. I thought he did a great job. I'm glad he appeared. I thought he did a fine job. Just the way things work sometimes. But he texted me, and it was great to hear from him. I hope to talk to him more often in the future. Next update, Lonnie Rogers. This is a big one. This is probably one of the biggest ones that we're covering in this episode. Lonnie Ray Rogers, Lonnie to those who loved her most, was a 29-year-old from Sagertown, Pennsylvania. She was deaf and the mother of 2. On the night of January 7th, 1981, Lonnie was at home with her children and husband. After putting the kids to bed, Lonnie's husband claimed she left with another man. She was never seen again. We all suspected at the time that when Unfound covered this disappearance, and Allison is Lonnie's daughter's name, that story was probably crap. And now we know that it certainly is. How? Lonnie's husband, Allison's father, has confessed to killing Lonnie. To confess to killing Lonnie. This just happened within the past month. In fact, it was happening right around the time I was up there seeing my dad, and it's a little bit of a coincidence because Sagertown really is not that far from where my dad lives, just going up Route 79 going toward Erie, in fact. Although it's not been recently, I've been through Sagertown way back in the day, maybe going back like when I was going to Grove City College, somewhere around there, because it's, once again, that area all very close to each other. So he is, he's in his 70s, and he has said, yep, I killed Lonnie. I don't think anybody's surprised by this. I think we're just surprised that the guy confessed. This is very much like Susan and Natasha Carter, where Susan's husband on his deathbed confessed, and we know that Natasha and Susan were eventually found on his property, much like a lot of people predicted, including myself. The difference here, though, is I don't think that this guy is on his deathbed. He's in his 70s. I don't think he's on his deathbed. I've seen nothing that he's been diagnosed with some terminal disease or anything. It does seem that he's had a hard life and might have been homeless for a time. Certainly, things since 1981 have not been good for him, but he has confessed to murdering her. The difference, though, as of now, and I'm recording this on Christmas Eve of 2025, we still have no location. We don't know, at least publicly, he has not said where he put her, and we would hope that would be included in his confession. Like I said, it's been some weeks. Is he going to hold out? Now, we know these things happen. We know that it's usually men confessing to crimes, willing to take the charges that go along with the confession, but then never reveal anything. It's more common than we'd like. And in fact, we've had like Angie Arnell. Her husband went to jail for a few years. Her remains still missing. And he has, of course, has a bizarre story regarding that. We know, like, Tiffany Johnson's ex-boyfriend, charged and convicted of kidnapping, she's still missing. We know Unique Harris. She was certainly murdered by Isaac Moy. She is still missing. Hasn't given up where she is. So, although we can be hopeful that Lanine's husband, being that he's confessed, he hasn't been convicted, he's just outright confessed to it, you'd think that would come along with pointing authorities and her family in a direction. I guess that hasn't happened yet. But let's hope it does. But why just out of nowhere did this? Probably still a little unclear. We have to keep in mind it's been 44 years. I guess better late than never. But we want that location and what he did. We need to know all of it. Of course, for Lanine's family to really sew this all up. But also it helps us, people who analyze these disappearances, knowing what he did with her and how he did it, why he did it, where he did it, maybe can help us with a lot of these disappearances that are similar, that are still unsolved. Next update, Jennifer Perry. Jennifer Ray Perry was a 13-year-old from Marathon, Florida. She had a brother and sister and could be a wild child. On the night of July 30th, 1993, Jennifer and her mother got into an argument in the street. Jennifer stormed off. Her mother believes she walked to Jennifer's sister's. Jennifer never arrived. She was never seen again. The update for this one is simply that I went right by where she disappeared back in late October when I was on the RV trip with my brothers Michael and Brian. You might remember that my brother Brian has an RV, a 40-footer, very nice. And we got in there, went over there, and we left from Polk City and went down past Miami, out onto Route 1. We went the whole way out to the end, right up there, out to the end there at Key West, and got kicked out of an RV park that was actually military, federal government property. It was a military complex in here. We just kind of drove right onto it. That was interesting, and it was a fun trip. We hope to do it again soon, but drove right past it, right past that street in Marathon, Florida. Certainly, things have changed down there since 1993. It's really built up a lot more since then, 32 years ago. But the idea that I got just from being there is it seems highly unlikely that Jennifer would have started walking and, walked to what we might call the mainland and continued, living her life. And she still, lived for several years after this, or even is still alive here in 2025. That seems unlikely, especially considering, as is noted in the write-up, that she was a wild child. She had problems with discipline. You might also remember that I got a FOIA on that. It was like hundreds of pages long that I eventually, of course, passed on to her family. And they looked at a lot of different people in that area. I'm still not sure what to think. I forget what I wrote for the Patreon blog, where I write and try to make predictions. That's how I keep track of the ones that I get right and the ones that I get wrong. I use that blog as the template. I can go back and check, and that is accessible to the people who support Unfound through Patreon, so they can see if I'm telling the truth or not about what I say my accuracy rate is. I'm still a little bit up in the air. Like I said, I don't remember what I wrote there. But certainly she could have been harmed by an adult. But what you also see there, you won't be surprised, it's so much water. And if on that night Jennifer was thinking about running away, or she'd had enough of her family and her mother, and she was in a very dark place in her head, there's bridges to jump off right down the street. Now, whether they're high enough to kill you if you hit the water, like if you jump off the Golden Gate Bridge? I don't know. But going out into the middle of one of those bridges and jumping, you're going to have a hard time. If you survive it, you're going to have a hard time swimming back to shore. Maybe that's enough. Just a little hard to say. But I was there, and going to these places like I did with Sherry Mahans, even though we've not featured Sherry's disappearance yet on Unfound, going there and seeing it for yourself does help. I don't know, maybe we overestimate how much it helps, but I think it helps a bit. Even driving down the street here and seeing where Kelly Rothwell, I go by that condo all the time. Not every day, but at least a few times a week. You just kind of take it for granted after a while, to be honest. But when you go down and look at a place for the first time, you go by and you think, man, would this happen back in 1993? It does at least help a little bit for your analysis. Next update, Justin Gaines, and somehow I don't know if I missed this the first time around, but Justin Glenn Gaines was an 18-year-old from Snellville, Georgia. He was a college student and came from a blended family. In the early morning of November 2nd, 2007, Justin was at a club in Duluth, Georgia. After unsuccessfully trying to find a ride home, Justin was seen on video walking into the parking lot. He was never seen again. So the update is that a video, or videos, plural, that were taken of the night at this club where Justin was that night, those videos have been started to be put out to the public. Like I said, I will admit, I did not go back and listen to the original episode for Justin's disappearance. So did we talk about this? Did we not talk about this? I'm guessing I asked about it, given that it was a club, and on and on and on and on. But I'm getting the idea that these videos, or this video, and I guess in separate clips, that is now being released. And when I say just released, I mean within the last week, just before Christmas of 2025, are just coming out. But as of the recording here, once again on Christmas Eve of 2025, the video that actually has Justin in it has not yet been released. We'll see if this goes anywhere. You have to remember this disappearance is over 18 years old, and having watched the clip, you can tell. You watch it, it's like, man, I feel like this is a video that was taken 30 years ago, and you look at like the fashions and everything. In fact, it's weird in that how it's done, it almost doesn't look real. It almost looks like it's, I don't know, video like from a sitcom or something. It doesn't look like it's a real building, real room and everything, but I guess it is. If you've seen it, or maybe you know what I mean. If you haven't seen it, let me know what you think. It's certainly real. I'm not disputing its authenticity. It's just weird looking at something that's 18 years old like this. It just doesn't seem real in some ways. But the one that has Justin in it hasn't been released yet. I will say again what I say about video. Unless it actually shows the disappearance, its usefulness is usually next to zero. So I get that video is going to get a lot of attention. It's going to put more eyeballs back on it. On this disappearance, and I guess that's not bad. And people who can see this video can say, oh yeah, there I am, and maybe these people can come forward if something pops into their mind or something. But I think the track record with video in regarding disappearances, unless it actually shows the disappearance happening, for example, if the video, it has to show if somebody jumped off a bridge. Or if the person's walking along and the video shows the person getting abducted, by some car pulls up and the person gets dragged into a car. That kind of video is helpful. Most other kinds of videos just showing a person walking off in a direction, things like that, usually not that helpful. For example, Chance Engelbert, as I've already covered him in this update episode. He was videoed twice that evening walking around Gehring, Nebraska. Really, those did not help in solving his disappearance at all. Zero. And we have Kyle Fleischman and many other disappearances where the missing people seen all over the place on video, not helpful. So I think it's good when video is released. Certainly I'm in favor of that. But it just hasn't really proven to be that helpful in solving disappearances. So I wouldn't get your hopes up, people, is what I'm saying for Justin Gaines. Next update, Brandon Roberts. Brandon Roberts was a 39-year-old from Portland, Oregon. He was the father of 3 and had worked to help the homeless. On June 7th, 2021, Brandon was due to talk to his oldest son on the phone. However, when that time came, someone texted back on Brandon's phone saying Brandon wasn't there. He was never seen again. Now, most of you already know that eventually Brandon was found alive. And so this disappearance update is very much like Trevor Nichols in that within the last maybe 6 weeks, I've had an opportunity to speak to Brandon's mother, who was the guest for the episode. And the news, just like with Trevor, the news with Brandon continues to be very good. That, he has a very positive outlook on life. Things are looking good for him in the future. He's doing well. And but once again, like Trevor, I'd certainly like to talk to Brandon one of these days about what exactly happened during that time. But I may not get to ever do that. If it doesn't happen, that's fine. But I always want to leave that door open because I think that it can help all of us learn a little bit more about disappearances. But it had been a while since I spoke to Brandon's mother. She, of course, had let me know when he had been found. If you remember, he got burned, and in the hospital they figured out who he was. And I had really not spoken to her since that time. And then I thought, man, I really want to see what's going on. And she had nothing but positive things to say about Brandon and how everything is going. So another fantastic story within this update episode. Brandon Roberts. Next update, Jason Landry. Jason David Landry was a 21-year-old from San Marcos, Texas. He was a college student who excelled at music. On the night of December 13th, 2020, Jason was on his way to his parents' house when, for some reason, he ended up on the wrong road, and soon Jason wrecked his car. He was never seen again. The first update on this is just coincidentally within the last 10 days. I'm recording this on Christmas Eve of 2025. Within the last 10 days, they had a mini disappeared marathon. Or was it the A&E channel, ID channel? I don't know. I forget. And Jason's was one of those episodes. And as I stated in the live show at the time, right after I saw it, it's disgusting. There was a guy on there, former FBI agent, throwing certainly around his weight as a former FBI agent to try to tell people, well, this was foul play. It's all disgusting. Oh my goodness. Luckily I live by myself, given how much I was shouting at the TV. It's just, I can't. But that's the first update. I saw that, and I'm like, this guy doesn't want to know what he's talking about. All this speculation and sensationalism, no facts to back up any of it. And this guy's out there advertising. He has a company, and we're going to research your disappearances. Oh, my goodness. So that was so if you run across that disappeared episode, it must have been done a few years ago. You'll see what I mean. Of course, Jason is still missing. The second update is that recently there was another search down there, and I think even John Lorden, was he there? Might have been there. Nothing came of it, unfortunately, very sadly. Very sadly. Even though flying in the face of all other people maybe looking at this disappearance, I will still continue and insist that Jason Landry, unfortunately, is deceased and is still somewhere very local to the area where his car was wrecked. Did not get picked up by anybody, did not get run off the road. He was driving his vehicle on and on and on. All right. It's just, I don't know how people can get on there and say stuff like that. This is going back to how I started this update episode with me wanting to get into some of this, actually doing this like actual real investigation work. When I see something like this guy who was on this disappeared episode, or yes, Phil Klein and many, not him picking him out personally, but all private investigators and how they don't know what they're doing and everything. Yes, this is very motivating for me in 2026 for the missingpersonsconsultant.com website. That's why it got started. And at some point, somebody who knows something has to start doing something about this instead of only interviewing people and putting, these disappearances out there. At some point, we have to have a changing of the guard where people who actually know stuff actually crowd out the people who don't know stuff. That eventually has to happen. And this is what comes to mind for this update for Jason Landry. Next update, Jesse Farber. Jesse Lee Farber was a 29-year-old from Tamaqua, Pennsylvania. He was the father of two and was a creative type. On the night of August 11th, 2015, Jesse called his girlfriend, telling her he was on a nearby mountain. The coyotes were after him and to bring guns. The girlfriend and her brother immediately arrived at the location, but could not find Jesse. He was never seen again. Of course, the update, many of you already know, Jesse's remains were found. I know where they were found. His girlfriend, who was the guest for that episode, did send me a map with a little dot on it as to where he was found. But at least to this point, at the recording of this episode, that specific location is not allowed to be made public, so I'm not going to do that. But she tells me, of course, I've never been there. She has been there many times. Rachel's been there many times conducting searches, and she told me that where his remains were found were within one of the prior search areas. My understanding is that it was a couple of ATV riders in the area who came upon Jesse's remains, once again in an area that had already been searched previously. Whether that means it was searched last year or way back in 2015, I don't know. But just like Chance Engelbert, Jesse Farber, his remains found by accident. Now, you should know there are still people out there believing that this was foul play and believing that when he said coyotes on that call, he meant people. It's slang term for people who smuggle people into the United States. That's the slang term. Coyotes is the term for people who do this. That's what he meant. That's all crazy. It's all crazy. But there are people out there saying that. Jesse Farber had a lot of stuff going on, most of it bad. I think that Rachel was a very good girlfriend to him, trying to support him. But being that he was, as you heard her say in the episode, he was getting paid, but money was still missing and all that. It's all bad. And, nobody should be surprised that he went missing like this. And this is another one that I got absolutely correct. He's out there. He just hasn't been found yet. He's in that area where he said he was. He just hasn't been found yet. I was right. This stuff can be learned if anybody wants to take the time to do so. A reminder, I have no police experience. I have no official investigation experience, but somehow I'm still able to get 90% of these right. Whereas we have people like I just talked about with Jason Landry, years of FBI experience, making all these allegations, and surely none of them are going to be true. So Jesse Farber, very sad. Seemed like a good guy. I like Rachel a lot. I communicated with her several times since she was on the podcast a couple years ago. I know this is not the outcome that she wanted, but I think that she knew pretty well that this is probably going to be the outcome. But maybe was expecting for it never to be resolved. That certainly could have easily happened. But it is now resolved, and certainly enough to think that Jesse disappeared and died all on his own. Next update, Chris Douthit. Christopher Ray Douthit was a 24-year-old from Roanoke, Virginia. He was a roofer and father of twins. On October 25th, 2013, coincidentally my mother's birthday, Christopher was due to meet a female friend at a grocery store at 5 p.m., In fact, he called her to say he was already there. However, when she arrived, Christopher could not be found. He was never seen again. If you might remember on a previous update, was it a year ago or something, his family actually had him declared deceased. The interesting part is seemingly they're still trying to figure out what happened. And since the last update, I've actually had some texts back and forth with his mother. Of course, I cannot go into the contents of those, except to say that they're still looking for him. I continue to believe, one of the big things, what do I say? Missing people lie. Did he actually make it to that place where he was supposed to be picked up? I doubt it. I think this is just, once again, Chris had a lot going on, similar to Jesse Farber. We're going to get to Zach Carey here eventually. Similar to many other missing men who have been found deceased, Chris had a lot going on. And he did have to cross over a river to get to that location. I think he lied to the woman who was picking him up, and I think he jumped in and committed suicide. Now, how are you going to ever prove that now? I don't know. It's going to be tough. But I think that's what happened. Certainly still we'll talk to his mother. Anytime she wants to text me, I'll get back to her. I think, though, that, if she wants to think that it's foul play or he's still out there, I don't mind disagreeing with her. Hopefully she doesn't mind me disagreeing with her. If that's what she wants to think, I will try to give her the best advice going in those directions without feeling like I'm enabling her. I'm always going to be honest. But if that's what she wants to do, I can give her, a couple things that, she might be able to try if she's getting help as well. The tough part is I would never, unless it's something having to do with inheritance, like it did with Dorian Myers, and she had a son. She was declared deceased. But most of the time, I would say, do not declare your missing loved ones deceased. Don't do that unless it's, you have a lot of property and other things that are all then tied up because of it. You got to keep it going because you don't want to give the police any reason to stop investigating. They want to do that anyway. By declaring somebody deceased, it gives them like, oh, well, person's deceased. They think it's deceased, so why should we work on it anymore? That's what happens. But that happened here. It's not something I would have recommended, but they did it. And but they're still trying to figure out what happened. Next update, Zach Carey. Zachary Carey was a 38-year-old from Evansville, Indiana. He came from a huge family and had been a welder. On May 30th, 2023, outside Linville, Indiana, Zach was with a longtime pal of his riding around in that person's vehicle. This person says Zach got out and walked off into the woods. He was never seen again. This is another one where remains have been found. Zach was found, and yes, he was found in the area that was described in the episode outside of Linville, Indiana. And it's enough for me to be satisfied that there was no foul play and that he died due to the elements, due to drugs. Was he sick? Pick one, or it's a combination. And I do not believe that this guy that was with Zach that day had anything to do with it. Zero. Zach was found, like Jesse Farber, was found in one of the search areas. And maybe to go back to Chance Engelbert's, I don't know if he was found in a search area, an area that had previously been searched or not. I don't know. But certainly that happened with Jesse, and with Zach, same thing. It was an area that had been searched before. And this time he was found once again, as I say, by accident. I think it was hunting, a couple hunters who found his remains this time, in contrast to Jesse, where it was a couple ATV riders. So right out there outside of Linville is where Zach was found. I'm not surprised by this at all. Maybe some people are, but chalk this up as another one that I got right for 2025. Very sad. I, of course, always hope that these people are alive, but from a professional point of view, I think it's best that I'm able to somewhat be able to predict what the resolutions are going to be before they happen. And I stake my reputation on that. I don't know if anybody else really does that for themselves, but I do that for me. Only a couple more to go as far as the podcast episodes go. Next update, Shannon Collins. Shannon Lee Collins was a 48-year-old from Pottsville, Arkansas. He was a married military vet with a son and stepdaughter. On March 11th, 2021, Shannon came home from a business trip and had an argument with his wife. The next morning, she says Shannon walked off and didn't return. He was never seen again. In a previous episode, it was documented that his wife and her daughter, his stepdaughter, have been charged with some fraud regarding his military benefits. And the update is, I don't think, any resolution to that. If there's going to be a trial, did they plead not guilty? Did they take a plea? I haven't seen anything public regarding that, but it should be known, none of that, and none of it has anything to do with his disappearance. It has things to do with things that are Shannon's that they continued to cash in, spending or collecting military benefits for somebody else who's no longer around is illegal. I think that's even a federal crime. So they could be in some trouble if that's what they were actually doing, if that is proven. Shannon is still missing. A lot of people suspect that the mother, the stepdaughter, the son might have all had something to do with it together. I'm certainly open to that idea myself. Certainly Shannon's family, his biological family, brothers, sisters, whoever else, certainly believe that. And we'll see if these charges, these monetary charges, lead to charges regarding any sort of foul play. But right now, I don't think anything has been done in court regarding it. Next update, Ian Rogers. Ian Benjamin Rogers was a 39-year-old from Crawfordville, Florida. He was a father and known as being a really nice guy. On the morning of August 26th, 2024, Ian left for work. On the way there, he texted his boss saying his vehicle was overheating. Ian never made it to work. He was never seen again. You might remember that I had a couple of hosts of another podcast as the guests for this particular episode. And what has happened since they were on, this, of course, just a couple months ago. Ian, the truck, it's not his truck. Remember, it was his boss's truck. The owner of the company had gotten in that truck to reward Ian for his good work, and Ian turned around 3 days later. Ian disappears with the truck. I know I'm not supposed to be laughing, but it's darkly humorous. The truck was found. And it was found maybe about a month after the episode came out. I'm not saying that the episode had anything to do with it, but just put it in the time frame. It was found, but the noteworthy part, and this might be a first for Unfound, that it was found on land, but it wasn't on a road. Seemingly, if we're to think that Ian actually put the truck where it was found, it seems that Ian took it off-roading. It was found in a spot where, you'd go off a road and through the trees and through the bushes, and there was no road. It's kind of like Doc Brown in, what was it, Back to the Future. He goes, where we're going, we don't need roads. This is kind of what, I guess, Ian, if we want to believe that, Ian did with that truck, and that is why maybe it wasn't found right away. I do not believe, I think this is very much like the others with Jesse Farber, Zach Carey, Chance Engelbart, in that I think the truck was found by accident. The footnote to that, though, is it does seem that the truck was in the area where Ian's phone had last pinged. So I guess it's possible that it was found by somebody who was kind of just wandering around that area, people knowing that's where the last ping was, maybe. But I don't think that it was found during a coordinated search. But here we are, end of this year, end of 2025, but he is still missing. So the truck is found. He is still missing. But the truck was found in the woods, out in the middle of nowhere, kind of northeast of the park where the truck was seen on a picture on a license plate camera, if you'll remember that from the episode. So not really that far from this last known location or the truck's last known location. But Ian is still missing. And not sure how far he could have gone. He very well might have even still be alive. And I think I raised that possibility as being very possible when I wrote the Patreon blog for Ian's disappearance. So the truck was found. I've not heard if anything within it. What was left in it? Was it damaged? Were there signs of violence? I have no information regarding any of that. And that concludes all the updates for the podcast. I'm now going to go into updates for the disappearances that have been featured on Unfound Now. That is the monthly series I do on YouTube. So the first Unfound Now update really isn't an update, but it's still, we might just call this a pondering. And that is the disappearance and we now know death of Alan White. Remember, so I think might even go back to the first year that I started doing Unfound Now. This was the guy. It was in Texas, and in the morning he went to the gym, was on the treadmill for like 20 minutes. Not very long time, and just went. That's all he did, and then he got back in his car. I think that he went to a convenience store. Maybe he went to there before the gym, and then he never went home. Remember that? And then I forget how long later his remains were found on the campus of a local, was it a private school or a small college, something like that, and still no answers. If you do any Googling, anything, trying to, anything regarding Alan White's death, you get nothing. And very curious about. He was, they have him on video looking at his phone. And even for me, tough to tell exactly what happened here. Of course, we know, unfortunately, humans are capable of doing almost anything at any time, even if they seem like they're in their right mind. Maybe we can think of that guy from some years ago who seemed to be having a decent life, but inside he was going through some bad things. He stole an airplane, remember, up there in Washington, and it was Horizon Air plane that he flew around. He wasn't even a pilot. He flew around for a while before crashing into the ground. Just did that out of nowhere. So people are capable of anything at any time. I just don't think that's what happened with Alan. But there's nothing that's ever come out saying, oh, he was murdered. Oh, it was this. Oh, it was that. If you remember, he was gay. He was in a relationship. I think that they've satisfactorily proven that the man in Alan's life was at home when this all happened. There's no proof that Alan went home and then something happened there, and then the other guy put Alan where he was eventually found. No reason to believe any of that. Was Alan in a relationship with somebody else, and that's why he was looking at his phone? That's been rumorized. You can see people have speculated on that out there. Likewise, I don't think there's any proof of that. So it's one that sticks with you. And it's, how do I put this in a way that's okay? Of course, because his remains were found, it can't be an Unfound, the regular podcast episode. It can't be one of those. I have to wish it could be. And I guess then I would have to wish that Alan's remains weren't found, which puts me in a difficult position. But this is the kind of disappearance, if there was no remains found yet, that would make a really good podcast episode. But it can't. So it's one that sticks with me. Next Unfound Now update, Michael Vaughn. The story comes to us from where he went missing in Fruitland, Idaho. Court records released Monday. This is just news with, of course, since August. Court records released Monday detail the alleged involvement of 4 people of interest in the disappearance of Michael Vaughn, including claims that the missing boy was abducted, killed, and buried in a Fruitland backyard. A probable cause affidavit filed in June was unsealed after Stacy Wondra appeared in court November 17th. The document outlined searches, interviews, and evidence gathered following the boy's disappearance. During initial searches of approximately 300 homes, police say K-9 units tracked Vaughn's scent to a residence where Stacy Wondra, Stacy, by the way, a man, Stacy is a man, his wife, Sarah Wondra, and their 2 roommates, Brandon Shurtleff and Adrian Lucien, lived. All 4 individuals have previously been named people of interest in the boy's disappearance, according to the affidavit. One neighbor reported to police that they saw Vaughn riding a tricycle in the neighborhood the day he disappeared. Another neighbor reported seeing that same tricycle at the Wondra home during a garage sale months after Vaughn's disappearance. The Wondras initially denied any involvement in the case. However, in November 2022, Stacy requested a meeting with investigators. During that interview, Stacy claimed he was home the night Vaughn was abducted and saw Sarah carrying the boy into their house. Stacy allegedly told people it was originally Lucien's idea to abduct a child to sell for money and that they would receive a $10,000 cut. He claimed Sarah told everyone to follow her lead. Stacy told investigators that Sarah, Shurtleff, and Lucien duct taped Vaughn and placed him in a duffel bag. Put their accents on the right words, Ed. He claimed they took the boy to Shurtleff's mother's home in Kuna that night, I guess Kuna, Idaho, where Vaughn remained overnight. According to Stacy's account, the other 3 returned to the Kuna residence the next day and brought the boy's body back to the Wondra home in Fruitland. He told police that Sarah and Lucien buried Vaughn in their backyard. Following his interview with detectives, Stacy allegedly told his mother during a jail video visit that Sarah accidentally killed Vaughn by suffocation. 2 days after Stacy's interview with the police, investigators executed a search warrant and excavated the Wondra's backyard. Law enforcement said 5 cadaver dogs alerted to the same area where Stacy told detectives Vaughn's body was buried. Despite the search and ongoing investigation, Vaughn has not been found. Law enforcement has not announced charges against Sarah, Shurtleff, or Lucien. I got to tell you, I don't know what to think about this. These are the people, I probably in another update, maybe even a couple years ago, I mentioned them. These are the same people. They were charged or they were investigated or the property was searched. Nothing came of it. And now here in late 2025, it seems like we're doing everything all over again. And I will say it again. I'm not sure what to think of this. If you tune in Thursday nights or catch the replay when I appear on friend of the podcast Dee's show on Thursday evenings on YouTube, Michael Vaughn, I think we've just called him Mikey maybe even sometimes. His name has come up. Dee, she's very much into the disappearances of children, kind of the opposite of what I am. Not totally opposite, but I think you know what I mean after 9 years of doing Unfound, that I tend to stick to more to adult disappearances for reasons I've gone over and over and over many times, but Dee's more into child disappearances. And so she's taken a great interest in Michael's disappearance. So she and I have talked about it a couple times. I don't know. I guess what I'm saying here is I have doubt about this. It seems the Stacey Wandra guy, I mean, he can, as what have I said many times when it comes to when people talk like this, they can tell you everything but what you really want to know. What we really want to know is, where's Michael Vaughn? It seems like this guy knows everything but that. And that always makes me suspicious. So he's telling them this, he's telling them that. We took the kid here, they duct tape, but he can't explain how, well, yeah, he was buried in the backyard, but he can't explain why the kid's not there now. This should be, I don't know, necessarily a red flag, but a caution flag. This should be a caution flag for investigators. And I know the dogs. Don't talk to me about the dogs. Don't talk to me about the cadaver dogs or anything else. Don't talk to me about that. Unless a human can explain why the remains aren't in the ground anymore, I'm not going to believe any dogs. And of course, as you'd expect, the other three named in this article are denying all of this. So I just don't know. Do kids get kidnapped and are they sold for money? I'm not saying it's never happened. Of course it has, but it is so rare. And I can't get around the idea that Stacey is just trying to get the rest of these people in trouble. I guess it's seemingly he's getting himself in trouble in the process, but there's still things about this that I do not believe. Certainly, could a kid be kidnapped? Do kids get abducted? Yes. Do kids get killed when they get abducted? Yes. How often, though, is it really an accident? Because it sounds to me like he's trying to portray it was an accident. They duct taped this kid's mouth shut, and then he suffocated because of it. It seems like this is the story Stacey's trying to tell. How often does that happen? So I have my doubts about this. And really on top of everything else, with these people, would they really, really, really try to sell that tricycle? Knowing that, I mean, they only lived a couple blocks away from where Michael Vaughn was before he went missing. And they're just going to outright, right down the street, sell the tricycle that's Michael's. Once again, it seems unlikely. I realize these people aren't supervillains in a James Bond movie. But, so I have my doubts about all of this, and for a variety of reasons. Next update, Heidi Plank. Once again, an Unfound Now episode. This is the woman who went missing in downtown L.A. next to this high-rise condo, and their dog's found in the condo, and she's still missing, and they went and searched the landfills and have not found anything yet. There's allegations that she went to some party there, and overdosed or there was a murder and there was a bunch of people who saw it. I'm not inclined to believe any of that. But you should know there is a website set up for Heidi Plank's disappearance. I don't have it. I didn't put it in my notes here. But there is an email. I've emailed it a couple times. Certainly would like to feature her disappearance on the podcast so we can get a lot deeper into these tales, going past what has been the public information so far. That's what we try to do here at Unfound. Unfortunately, nobody has responded yet. But I will keep at it. Of course, there's a variety of reasons that people don't respond to me or don't respond to other people who are, working for Unfound, trying to reach out to people. There's a variety of reasons. Maybe they don't want to. Maybe it's difficult for them. Maybe they think the whole thing's gotten blown out of proportion, which may very well be the situation for Heidi's disappearance, given how much attention it got in the United States. Maybe they think it's just been too sensationalized, and who knows, they're probably getting all sorts of requests, and mine is just one of many. There's a lot of different reasons, but certainly would like to hear more about this. Certainly, I think a solvable disappearance as far as I can tell. She very well may be in a landfill. But all this other stuff about going to a party and there were a bunch of people there, to think that a bunch of people kept their mouths shut and all this time and it's and haven't been able to offer solid information. It just seems unlikely. Could she have gone to meet some person there and something happened? Okay. But a big party where there was gambling and drugs and everything else, and then she's there, and then it seems unlikely. Especially if for no other reason she went missing during the daytime. If this had happened at 2 in the morning, they're just having this party out, at 7 in the evening or whatever it was. Once again, seems unlikely. We'll find out one of these days maybe if I can have somebody from her family on the podcast. Next update, Andrew Frantz, Frantz. Now, coincidentally, this is a disappearance where I have been in touch with somebody in Andrew's family a couple months ago about featuring his disappearance as a podcast episode, very much like how, for example, Jason Landry's coverage on Unfound Now became a podcast episode. Bo Mann's Unfound Now coverage eventually became a podcast episode. I'm trying to do that for Andrew Frantz. Was talking to somebody in his family, but now they've not responded to a few of my messages, and maybe this is the reason. This is an article that came out, of course, just within the past month. The disappearance of Andrew Frantz has returned to public focus following a press release from the Excelsior Springs Police Department on December 10th of 2025. Prompted in part by renewed internal review and an ongoing family advocacy for answers. Frantz was last heard from in April of 2023 when he was 31 years old. In the press release, police described Frantz as a white male with blonde hair and blue eyes, about 5 feet 11 and approximately 175 pounds. Police emphasized that the renewed attention stems from a deliberate effort to revisit the case and to acknowledge the family's continued search for answers. According to Lieutenant Ryan Dowdy, the department recently completed a focused internal assignment intended to re-examine the case with a fresh perspective. Corporal Hyatt was temporarily removed from regular duties and tasked solely with reviewing the Frantz case, revisiting reports, evidence, and prior leads without prior involvement or assumptions. The assignment ran from late October through early December and included follow-up interviews and travel. Dowdy explained that while no new leads emerged, the special assignment did help to rule out previous leads that had hit a roadblock. Dowdy said the goal was to ensure investigators have fully examined the evidence they have and to confirm there are no overlooked leads. We wanted a fresh set of eyes to run everything we have into the ground, he said, explaining that the department wanted to be confident it had exhausted existing information while remaining ready to act if new information emerges. Police reiterated that France's case remains open and that investigators are looking for credible information. They shared the importance of keeping Andrew France's name visible in the community. Anyone with information about France's disappearance or whereabouts is asked to call the TIPS hotline at 816-474-8477 and reference the case number E as in Edward, S as in Sam, 202-301017. The Excelsior Springs Police Department can also be reached at 816-630-2000. Family members and loved ones have also continued to advocate publicly for Andrew France through a Facebook group dedicated to sharing updates, memories, and information related to his disappearance. And if you're wondering a little bit about, well, what exactly happened here, I'm just going to read something back from, it's a more recent article, but it goes through the facts. Excelsior Springs Police Department is asking the public for help in locating 33-year-old man who's been missing for more than 2.5 years. The Sedalia Police Department said Andrew France was stopped by a Kansas City police officer after leaving Sedalia on April 20th, 2023. He then went to Excelsior Springs. He was driving a white 2019 Ford Escape SUV with a Florida license plate number of AV13NF. The car was found left in a Taco Bell parking lot in Excelsior Springs and was towed by the restaurant on April 23rd of 2023. So if you're wondering, that the general facts of his disappearance. Like I said, I'm trying to make it become a regular episode. No success yet. Like I said, it very well may just be because of recent media coverage locally, and it very well could be the police have said, hey, give us some time to work on this. Don't do any media or something, which, as you all know, I think is stupid that families shouldn't listen to that, but most do. Next update, Sebastian Rogers. And this is kind of like Alan White's, although Sebastian has not been found. But I think I have to talk about it because this is another one like Michael Vaughn, where me appearing on Dee's YouTube show on Thursday evenings, Sebastian's name has come up quite a bit. And I will say it again. Dee, her special interest when it comes to disappearances is into disappearances of children. Summer Wells, Sebastian Rogers, Michael Vaughn, and many others. And so she and I have talked about this. Sebastian Rogers. Remember, he was autistic. I think he was, 15 years old. And he was at his mother's place. His parents are divorced. Mother's with her new guy. And his father lives somewhere else. And Sebastian's went to bed. His mother said she heard something. And she was like, hey, what are you doing in there? She didn't hear the noise anymore. Got up the next morning. He was gone. In addition, what has come out is there's been some video from that night, like down the street. And some people are thinking there were people in the neighborhood who might have taken Sebastian. Was it, I've seen the video, but it's been a little while, and I don't know. I think when it gets to nighttime stuff and you're trying to decipher images and shapes and symbols and everything else, it's open to so much interpretation regarding this. I think that Sebastian went off on his own as a guy who reads missing persons news, just general news, what is being reported all over, mostly in the United States. You start to realize how many autistic children go missing, whether they're 15 or 12 or 9 or 8 or 6. It's amazing how many of them walk off. Now, some of them maybe were murdered by their parents. We know that happens. But I think we can safely say there's a lot of autistic children. And when I say children, autistic humans under the age of 18 who do walk off. And so I have to put Sebastian in this category. What were his plans? Where was he going to go? How did he think he was going to survive? I don't know if he was capable of putting that all together. Sebastian certainly was not unintelligent. I think Sebastian was very intelligent, but I don't know if he could plan it out that far ahead. It very well just may be that anxiety or something caused him, I just need to get out of here, and it wasn't all thought out. So I'm inclined to believe that he could have gone at least some distance, but unfortunately, sadly, I just don't think that he's alive now. I know a lot of people, well, his father might have had something to do with it, went and took him away, and now the father's been hiding him, or his father took him and killed him because of child support or something. I don't know if there's any facts to dispute those theories. It just seems unlikely. So, still unsolved. Maybe one of these days we can feature Sebastian on the podcast, of course, if he isn't found first. The tough part right now is it's hard to determine who. I'm not saying when I say it's hard to determine who you can trust, I'm not saying necessarily that any of these people are lying, whether it's Sebastian's mother and the guy in her life or Sebastian's father. What's obvious to me, though, is they have a lot of animosity between them, and so they are likely to distort things in a way to make the other look guilty, and it very well may be that none of these people are guilty. And so as long as that's the situation, I can't have any of them on the podcast. And the final update, coincidence or not, this is actually an update I missed from the previous one. It was not included. It should have been included in the update, episode number 21 from August, but I missed this. So just the way it worked out. But chronologically, this is the last one that I have to cover, but also coincidentally, I should have covered this 3-4 months ago. This has to do with the Unfound Now episode concerning Robert Williams. The search for a missing 80-year-old came to a sad ending in Arlington County as police confirmed Friday that Robert Pat Williams was found dead 6 months after he disappeared. Williams, who vanished on November 25th of 2024, was last seen at a store on the 2200 block of North Buchanan Street in Arlington, Virginia, wearing a camouflaged jacket. His Toyota Tacoma pickup truck was later discovered on Fairfax Drive near North Jefferson Street. And I've not looked up the map on any of this. Williams, a former Arlington resident who moved to Georgia, had returned to the area to visit a friend. His grandson, Nick Williams, said the family became alarmed when he failed to return home for Thanksgiving. According to the Fairfax County Police Department, Williams was found deceased on Friday in Arlington. Our thoughts and prayers are with his family and friends. Investigators do not suspect foul play at this time. So this was a guy from Georgia who drove to Virginia to see people and never returned to Georgia. And like it says here, his truck was found parked on a street, and then his remains were found. He was last seen at a store on North Buchanan Street, and his truck was found on Fairfax Drive. Does not say, at least in this article, how close his remains were to his truck. But 80 years old. Of course, a lot of things can happen. They don't think it's foul play. I know even for my dad, who is now 89, and he went to my brother's, not his son's. Long story, if you don't know. No time to get into that now. But he went to my brother's for Christmas Eve, or they met at a restaurant down in the Pittsburgh area, and it's like a 40-minute drive, and even for that 89-year-old, that's something. Dad drove down there, no problem. Got back, no problem. But you get into 80s and those kinds of things become a lot more shaky, even if the person has not been diagnosed with any brain problems. My father has not been. So, but even so, a lot of cars on the road. It's night. Everything put together. But my dad did it, but a lot of 89-year-olds can't. And even when we're talking about an 80-year-old, like Mr. Williams here, might have had issues going on. I just don't know. So, but he was found back in May. It would have been, or May or June of 2025 this year, and I should have included it in the previous update episode. Missed it. So I'm glad I'm getting to it now. And that concludes all of the updates for the podcast, Unfound, and the monthly YouTube series, Unfound Now. If you could now pause whatever you are doing as I now read off all of the missing people featured on Unfound and Unfound Now. Suzanne Lyle, Jason Jolkowski, Jesse Foster, Rose Marie Gayhart, Ben Charles Padilla, Kelly Rothwell, Joshua Guimond, Donnie Smatlack, Andrea Bowman, Robin Abrams, Regina Marie Boss, Christopher Hyde, Jeff Nichols, Rebecca Gary, James Walker, Teresa Butler, Charlotte Paulus, Lola Catherine Fry, Eric Franks, Jeff Joseph, Donna Mikolenko, David Medot, Kent Monroe, and Omar Shearer, Claudia Wells, Peggy and Patty McDaniel, Shannon Turner, Brandy Wells, Clashindra Hall, Ronnie Russell, Esther Westenbarger, Shane Fell, Ashley Eifert, Brandon Williams, Craig Freer, Pamela Golden, Chip Campbell, Amanda DeGuio, the passengers and crew of Flight 370, April Pitzer, Jennifer Wilkerson, Kent Jacobs, Aaron Gilbert, Tammy Leppert, Crystal Morrison, Chris Turner, Linda Carroll, Nikki McCown, Helen Diamond, Laura Bible and Ashley Freeman, Lucinda Hewells, Ashley Kohler, Debbie Lowe, Patrick Beavers, Clinton Nelson, Troy Galloway, Patty Action, Danielle Bell, Evelyn Hartley, Dow Phillips, Tyler Stice, Bill Underhill, Patricia Taylor, Aaron Barnard, Jeremy Burt, Brian Sullivan, Nikki Wells, Marina Bolter, Mandy Stokes, Greg Brooks, Rebecca Henderson, Dominic Holly Grisham, Tiffany Daniels, Nicholas Masucci, Donald Irwin, Billy DiSilvestro, Renee Yergain, Mikkel Biggs, Al Copper, J.R. Mullahan, Jamie Bowen, Travis Robertson, Rosemary Rapp, Kristen Modafferi, Zoe Campos, Sean Ginyard, Thomas Brown, Amanda Fravel, Julie Early, Ellen Sloan, Renee Lamanna, Nico Lisi, Leah Peebles, Melissa Hasley, Kimberly Raymer, Stephen Kocher, Bonnie Joseph, Immaculate Basil, Bobby Campbell, Kimberly Norwood, Alyssa Turney, Bobby Tennyson, Dale Kerstetter, Lacey Buenfil, Peggy McGuire, Jansen Brewer and Daniel Braden, Robert Wayne Cox, Lucas Degerness, Stephen Adams, Ashley Summers, Bonnie Dagus and Jeremy Dagus, Judith Emke, Jessica Hamby, Tim Beauchart, Devin Bond, Juanita Nelson, Desiree Ferris, Angie Yarnell, Deborah Asbury, Sean Koski, Mary Lands, Devin Brown Busetta, Shanna Boydo, Travis Murrow, Keith Fetter, Layla Faulkner, Megan Lancaster, Kelly Sims, Jack Hemby, Barbara Frame, Dory Ann Myers, Austin Pivo, Christine Hamilton, Monica Appleton, Jonathan Estes, Molly Miller, and Colt Haynes, Donnie Martin III, Kamisha Hollis, Lisa Wallace, Tammy McKittrick, Julie Say, Stephanie Clemens, Andy Chapman, Trevor Nichols, Tiffany Joseph, Tyler North, David Kesey, Lucera Sarabia, Brandy Myers, J.L. Hamblin, Bradley Allen, Timothy Guy, Janelle Matthews, Ronald McNutt, Cameron Remmer, Tammy Arthur, and Chad Peters, Jesse Ross, Lisa Shuttleworth, Jackson Miller, Patrick Reed, Jeremy Goodwin, Mary Jane Van Gilder, Phyllis Corbin, Eric Alvarado, Cassandra Ramirez, April Andrews, David Hardy Jr., Dennis Lushbaugh, Christy Nichols, Chris Sanders, Danielle Sleeper, Julie Weflin, Shelva Rafty, Rodney Kaiser, Chris Mittendorf and Christina Branham, Gregory Howes, Brian Cook, Charles Thompson, Jessica Garino, Jacob Weeks, Jackie Bucky Letney, Joe Bain, Vanessa Oren, Jennifer Casper Ross, Robbie Hurt, Unique Harris, Doug Jones, Deborah Bowman, Bradley Brooks, Angela Green, Jody Husentrut, Brennan Smokey, Rouse Chapman, Marion Hurley, Gayla Shaper, Caleb Powell, Chelsea Cobo, Bonnie Santiago, TJ Murray, Noah Davis, Patty Dudek, Ben Archer, Jake Lachelet, Sky Burnley, Kayleen Oling, Stephanie Hartwell, Nylene Marshall, Kaya Taylor, Pearl Pinson, Brenda Condon, Alwyn Albright, Sky Tosick, Sandy Knipe, Brian Schaefer, Teresa Woolard, Toby Anderson, David Schrader, Chance Engelbert, Julianne Gillet, Rachel Sierks, Sean Antill, Randy Duran, Rashawn Francis, Amanda Ward Romine, Crystal Bailey, Brenda Sika, Laverta Sorrell, Nicholas Shin, Kevin Newen, Ashley Simpson, Leanne Hosberg, Alicia Markovich, Audrey Herron, Lonine Rogers, Beatrice Viela, Ali Lowitzer, Jamie Peterson, Belinda Blaniar, Jordan Carvalho, Christian Balky Thompson, Paul Sanders, Jennifer Perry, Andrea Knabel, Sebastian Kelly, Marianne Verdecchia, Marcella Krolsey, and Mary Regan, Sue Swedell, Mark Heimbaugh, Dub and Chance Wackerhagen, Kimberly Wilson Talley, Harry Milligan, Paul Egan, Steve Davis, Douglas Crawford, Rhonda Smith, Ryan Stuka, Daniel Villarreal, Mary Watkins, Bradley Strassner, Justin Gaines, Jacqueline Cooper, Holly White, Michaela Bally, Chase Lackey, Belinda Brewster, the Pickering Six, Jay Boyle, Michael Cummins, Danny Higgins, Chad Smith, Robbie Rumbolt, and Jamie Lafaber. Brenda Davidson, Milda McQuillan, Kyle Fleischman, Paris Hobson, Bernard Rusness and Peggy McKay, Jessica Stacks, Natasha and Susan Carter, Angela Freeman, Mark Allen, Mary Cox, Jamie Valdez, Jace Martin, Brandon Rashar, Keith Call, and Sandra Haley, Evelyn Piper, Leslie Allen and children, Matthew Braswell, Brandon Roberts, Emily Richards, Bo Mann, Judith Devers Hyder, Barbara McCrae, Judy Brown and Richard Riesenberg, Jason Landry, Athel Turner, Treveline Evans, Alan Glasgow, Barbara Cotton, Tony Schwark, Sean Dickerson, Patricia Otto, David Wagoner, Mara Murray, Brian Vargo, Bianca Carrasco, Paige Renkowski, Betty Tepfer, Joel Akridge, Brenda Lambert, Aaliyah Boomer, Donnie Atkins, Brandon Barron, Jesse Farber, Christopher Dalfit, John Spira, Patsy Clark, Arlen Bynum, Irene Gakwa, Kenny Weaver, Ashley Higgins, Camille Dardanes, Pauline Diaz, Jamie Lee, Lisa Green, Larry Goodman, Irma McCurcheon, Glenda Griffin, Nancy Garcia, Kim Moreau, Carl Pope, Elenia Carisi, Sylvia Galvin, April Wiss, Ashley Linden, Jaden Carpenter, Ricky Bryant, David Fugati, Stevie Hammerly, and Joe Grashner, Aidan Clune, Brianna Maitland, James Leidka, Ray Fausto Leppi, Elaine Johnson, Carl Schooner Jr., Valerie Ingorvaya, Clinton Thomas Sr., Zach Carey, Shannon Collins, David Kallenberger, Blanca Elisa Robertson, Melinda Lopez, Marlo Christopher Gully, Matthew Keith, Christopher McNeil, Rob McLaughlin, Deanna Merrifield, Erica Hall, Clint Walker, Lene Westbrook, Joe Bushling, Jonathan Haddon, Tatiana Lupich, Jared McCulloch, Keith Mann, Wendy Gessing, Sue Braddock, Dwayne Thomas, Joey Offit, Richard Hitchcock, Tiffany Reed, Kenneth Plaisted, Layla Santinello, Vicky Smock, Keith Schmidt, Matthew Tuttle, Sally Stone, Aaron Derbyshire, Tanya Sadecki, Anthony Reyes, Tanova Ross, Marty Evans, Zachary Vidal, Leo Wagner, Brittany Shank, Ian Rogers, Corinna Slusser, Benjamin Ridley, William Charles Jones Sr., DJ Hamaker, Noreen Brown, Paul Holmes, Brandy Crouch, Linda Stoltfus, Erica Lloyd, Mary Lane Carter, Stephanie Hollingsworth, Corey Dale Moore, Alan White, Jason Landry, Aaliyah Scheibel, Kirsten Brueggemann, Mark Pinella, Cynthia Baal Traore, Louis Davila, Candy Gonzalez, Justin Sywick, Michael Vaughn, Wendy Gessing, Shannon Miller, Glenda Parton, and Dwayne Selby, Heidi Plank, Stephen Salazar, Lindsay Shobalok, Jordan Simeon, Marie Peter Toltz, Dylan Rounds, Dana Smithers, Gregory Peterson, Caitlin Rose Case, Lorenzo Holmes Jr., Elizabeth Capaldi, Christopher Miller, John Tipton, Maya Blanton, Bao Fan, Shauna Helford, Andrew France, Kay Alana Turner, Andrew Griffin, Fang Jin and John Fitzpatrick, Reno Long, Chelsea Grimm, Caitlin Alice Massey White, Thomas Irwin, Tyler Goodrich, Caleb Harris, Sebastian Rogers, Nadia Cole, Aaron Ong, and daughter Soraya, Taylor Casey, William Orlano, Cynthia McCoy, Robert Williams, Belva Day, Mason McKay, Joseph Gagnon, Alyssa Petrov, Travis Decker, Stephen Wright, Ruben Carranza, Richard Cleaves, James Cole. Please, if you have the time and the passion for any of these still unsolved disappearances, please contact these families. They need all the help they can get. And that's the program. I'm Ed Dunsel, and you've been listening to Unfound.